have the meeting safety and awareness thing that used to go up there. There we go. Take a look up there. This is what we expect of you. The court of everything you need to know except for what I'm going to read right now, which is, excuse me, I will read when we go into public comment. So we start off our meeting with an agenda check. Anybody have any additions or subtractions from the agenda at this point? Okay, we'll go on to 2 items from board members and general manager. We will start with Mindy.
Well, we'll talk about this later, but I attended our joint meeting with the city of Eugene with you, President Borofsky. And then also, this is maybe something about correspondence. I'll save the next thing for correspondence. Okay. That's all.
Commissioner Morris.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Sonia.
Had a lovely time attending the trunk or treat. Glad that we put that on. I think the community really appreciated it. Thanks.
All right, and for myself, I also attended trunk or treat. I was a squirrel with an EWEB hard hat and vest. It went over well. The little kids seemed to like it. Kudos for staff being able to transform that from being outside on a stormy Friday night to being inside in a matter of 48 hours. That's Herculean. It was well attended and well received. Thank you for everybody that made that pivot happen. I also had the opportunity to do a tour of the Quartz Creek Stage 0 restoration that EWEB was a pivotal part in helping to get off the ground. There was a fairly significant NOAA grant that helped do it, but there was an easement that EWEB went into to help get the top half of that under contract for the next 50 years, so that is going to remain a very nice wild tributary of the McKenzie River. Almost $1 million worth of wood went into it. And if you go up there, it doesn't look anything like Quartz Creek looked like before. This should help, hopefully, with our drinking water. It's a source protection project. So it was a bunch of partners that came together. McKenzie Watershed Council, Upper Soil and Water thing, NOAA, Forest Service, McKenzie River Trust, all of them. So I would suggest it's an easy one to see. You don't even have to get out of your car. If you go up to the Finrock boat landing and cross over and go up for a mile, it's all off to the right, and it's incredible. So I would have you guys take a look at that. But other than that, that's all I have. Mr. Lawson.
You almost called me commissioner, didn't you?
I almost did.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I did want to commend staff for the agility on the trunk or treat. As Oregonians, we're not afraid of rain per se, except when lightning gets involved. We did not want to electrocute any kids, and so really appreciate staff's ability to be agile with that and your attendance. I also wanted to thank commissioners for those who were available to attend the tour of International Paper and all of the information that they supplied to us on the partnership that they have and the impact that we have on them and they have on us. And so I wanted to appreciate that. And it is really an extension of a number of things that I've been doing recently as far as visiting some of our key accounts, people like Snow Temp. Today I visited Pacific Recycling. All of these have the opportunity to help us shape energy use, look at energy efficiency, time of use, a number of those things. And so really appreciate staff setting those up. The final thing I wanted to talk about today is that we do know that there are certain members in our community that are going through a pretty hard time. There have been some impacts on LIHEAP, for example, the Limited Assistance Home Energy Assistance Program. SNAP as well, a number of issues with federal employment, And so as staff, we've been evaluating and looking to implement certain actions or opportunities where we could help our community out. And so I was going to ask Deborah and Julie to kind of run through the roster of things that we're looking at to be sensitive to that and help our community.
All right, thank you, Frank. I did just want to start with let you all know that ECC has remained open without any service gaps since April 1st. And that's for that $280 bill credit for eligible customers. We have eShare or crisis funds that are available to customers who are impacted by job loss or other special circumstances. It can be accessed more than once a year, and CSAs are actively offering this option to folks. We're also working to proactively apply the $280 ECC credit to recipients of LIHEAP who have yet to apply for ECC. So folks that have LIHEAP but haven't accessed our program. We're about 3-4 weeks out to being able to finish that work, and customers would then be eligible for ECC again in January. And then lastly, our CSAs do have a list of community resources that they can refer our customers to for assistance beyond their utility bill. It's not enough money.
All right. Yeah, part of the reason, commissioners, that we're looking at this is we know that some of these have timing issues, temporary suspensions. For example, LIHEAP, their most vulnerable customers typically start registering in November and December. And so we've looked to accelerate and modify our programs to be able to help ride that through when and where possible. And so just wanted to let you know we are looking at various options as we go forward. We'll continue to adjust and come up with ideas probably between meetings. I know we have a number of check-ins, and so we're open to various ideas that we can continue to help our community out. So, thank you.
Tim.
Yeah, I'm unsure if I can ask questions in this portion, but so the eShare and crisis funds, Deborah, you mentioned impacted by job loss or other circumstances. Would that include losing SNAP benefits, LIHEAP benefits, or federal government workers who are not receiving paychecks?
Yes, so that's a really flexible program that allows us to more immediately reach people who are maybe just even in temporary crisis.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you all. Our next agenda item is public input. Anybody have any questions or comments on the correspondence that was sent to us in our packet? Sonia.
I wanted to thank staff for looking into the constituent concern about the role that we have in code enforcement and public safety disconnection requests. It looks like we have a path to analyzing that, and I just wanted to appreciate that staff are looking at that, and that it does seem that there's some potential action that we should take in the future depending on how that all goes. So thank you for that.
Mindy.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the executive recruitment timeline that was given to us. And I know we all filled out a doodle poll, and I did too, but seeing it on the calendar that there's 9 days that we need to set aside in the month of January, and there's like 19 total work days. That's a lot of days. I know we don't know how much of that we're going to need to use until we know who we're interviewing, but that's a lot of work time that we have to give, and not everybody has a flexible, well, I don't have such a flexible job schedule. I'll make it work, but it is a pretty big burden to ask. There's no getting around it, but I just wanted to highlight that. And also it kind of, for me, brings up things about we talk about the makeup of the board and how we want to have a diverse board, and things like this can make it hard for people to want to serve on these boards because not everybody can just take off 9 days in a month.
That observation. Anybody else on correspondence? Okay. Now we're moving on to public input. All right. Welcome to the public input session for this meeting. EWEB is a public non-for-profit organization whose charter is to deliver drinking water and electricity to our community. Although this forum is not used for an open back and forth dialogue, commissioners and staff value hearing diverse perspectives and receiving community input. Speakers are asked to keep their testimony relevant to EWEB business and request that everyone share their comments in a productive and respectful manner. Should speakers or audience member become disruptive, they may be muted and or removed from the meeting. At this time, we have 2 callers and 3 people in person. When your name is called, you will have up to 3 minutes to provide your comments. The public's input session is now open. Yes. Okay, so Lucy Ann was on the call-in list. She is not called in. If she calls in before the end of public comment, we'll be happy to listen to her. First up is Delacan. Oh, I don't know if I got that right, but you can hit your unmute. And
Can you all hear me okay on that side?
Yes, we are. Go ahead. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Evening, my name is Declan Zupo. I'm an EWEB customer renting in Ward 3. This evening, I'm hoping to address the board regarding the general manager selection process and the recent greenhouse gas inventory included in the board's packet for this evening. I've grown up in a climate that I see rapidly changing and increasingly affecting my life and that of my community. 2 years ago, my friends and I were displaced from our home following the unprecedented ice storm, which swept the Willamette Valley. Before that, in 2020, the opposite element forced my brother and I from our rental in Eugene due to improper ventilation. I'm hopeful, however, in knowing that this publicly owned utility has taken stringent actions to address the climate crisis, including SB15 to address and recognize this crisis, but more must be done. In accordance with Fossil Free Eugene's recommendation, I would like to advocate for the board to consider the following in selecting a candidate for the general manager position: a strong background in sustainability and climate action, experience with and or recognition of public utilities' importance as one of our keystone public institutions, and experience and comfort working with a wide spectrum of community stakeholders, and commitment to justice-informed public processes. With respect to the 2024 emissions audit I mentioned earlier, I think it's incredible to see that our 2030 goal of 50% reduction in operations-related emissions has been reached. Despite this, more steps must be taken to meet EWEB's net neutral goals. Some recommendations being establishing a time of replacement electrification requirement for your light fleet and EWEB-owned buildings, setting clear goals for all primary directives under SD15, including 100% building electrification by 2045 for the customer decarbonization directive, and incorporating rate protections and other affordability measures into climate planning. I appreciate your time and giving me the platform to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jim New, followed by Eric Dizer, by Eric.
Commissioners, thank you. My name is Jim New. I live in Ward 7. I'm speaking on behalf of 350 Eugene policy team. In the upcoming weeks, you will have the opportunity to hire a general manager who can set a direction for EWEB to provide more distributed locally sourced energy and support cutting edge electrification with renewable generation. This is an opportunity to hire a climate justice advocate to run an influential, well-funded public utility that can partner with the city of Eugene to promote electrification and weatherization upgrades. Over the last 10 years, the city has failed to meet the goals of the Climate Recovery Ordinance. City operations have reduced in-house greenhouse gas emissions by only 24% and community-wide greenhouse gas emissions by only 11%. In order to get to 50% reduction based on 2010 emissions by 2030. Here in the Pacific Northwest, We have been negligent in building energy infrastructure for many years that we are now in a period of scarcity. A gap of 9 gigawatts will be experienced by 2030 between what is needed and what is generated, an average amount consumed by the state of Oregon in a year. We need a general manager that has experience with locally sourced renewable energy, with battery storage energy systems, and establishing microgrids and virtual power plants. Solar is now 66% cheaper than a decade ago, and last year the world installed 553 gigawatts of solar power, which could power 100 million homes. 1 out of 5 new cars sold now is electric, opposed to 1 in 110 years ago. The Oregon legislature just passed legislation that removes hurdles to creating microgrids. Renewable sourcing is not going to be one technology saving the world, but is part of a smart integration with a technology-based grid that will be a solution component on the power side. EWEB needs a general manager who has experience at a public power utility with implementation abilities for affordable rate designs and appliance incentives, who can set a compelling, strategic, sustainable vision for the EWEB customer community. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric? D? Sorry. Red light now.
Good evening, Commissioners and General Manager and EWEB staff. Good to be with you. My name is Eric Jura. I'm an EWEB customer and I live in Ward 6. 2 or 3 quick items, just some comments. First of all, I wanted to extend my thanks to Commissioner Brown for something that happened a couple of months ago, but I didn't have a chance to be here in person until this evening. He arranged for me to get a tour of the Sierra Pacific Cogen plant. And I very much appreciate it. I had learned a tremendous amount about it, about how it works. A very impressive operation. The staff that provided the tour were extremely knowledgeable about all aspects of the plant itself, and also the various potential effects on the ecology and climate change and all of those sorts of things. They knew everything about it, all the rules, everything they had to follow, and it's an immensely complex undertaking to comply with all the layers of rules and so forth, and it seems that as though they're able to do that. So I was very impressed. Second thing is I had a chance to watch the video of your work session about the Willamette treatment plant. One thing I would say about it is given how long it's taken to reach this point, and you're making, I think you're making great progress at this point. It sort of it resonates with me that there's an awful lot of uncertainty and risk in this project. There's just a lot of steps that have to be followed. There's a lot of regulatory layers. There are a lot of engineering challenges, especially in dealing with earthquakes and those sorts of things. And I just hope that the staff will keep that in mind. I'm sure they will, but it's a particular interest of mine that happens. This is going to be an interesting project to try and pull off. So I very much appreciated the discussion. It was very, very informative. I very much appreciated the questions from the board. It's been my experience in watching the board and what it does that everyone does their homework and pays very close attention and asks good questions. And as always the case, I learned a lot, and I really appreciate that. And also the last thing was the discussion at the end where someone finally asked the Tim question, which is good. And I think that should be an important part of all of your discussion. So thanks for the good work on that, and I look forward to seeing what the design looks like and how all of that works out in the coming years. So thank you very much.
Next up is Lindy Kelly. Ken James. Or Jones.
Sorry. Good evening, Commissioners. General Manager. My name is Linda Kelly and I live in Ward 1. Thank you for the opportunity to give testimony. The choice of a new general manager is an important task in normal times. However, in these challenging times, it is crucial that the new manager have certain strengths to meet this moment. A recent OPB article that Jim referred to outlined the need for substantial new electrical capacity in Oregon in the next few years. EWEB, as the largest consumer-owned utility, is in the position to be a leader and an example of what is possible as we transition to 100% clean electricity for both transportation and home use eventually. A new general manager must be forward-thinking and knowledgeable about emerging technologies. The passage of HB 3336, the grid enhancement technologies, will play an important part in adding capacity to existing lines, avoiding long wait times, and significantly bringing down the cost. Oregon is a prime location for geothermal energy. The project at Newberry Crater is showing the viability of providing energy for large load increases like data centers in particular, with safe on-site baseload electricity, taking the load off of the statewide grid. The transition is beginning to roll out. Northwest Natural has joined a consortium of gas providers who are looking at network geothermal as a transition for their future business models. These are examples of the importance of a new general manager who is forward-thinking, informed, and is willing to advocate on electrical capacity statewide, as well as staying abreast of emerging opportunities to increase reliable clean energy locally. Thank you for your opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Ken Jones.
Good evening, Commissioners and General Manager. My name's Ken Jones, and I'm in Ward 1. Many have said things I agree with already tonight about the selection of a new general manager. I'm extremely concerned about Eugene failing its climate goals. So much more renewable energy to supplement the hydropower for any increasing needs for energy is important to me. It should be to the general manager as well. So how do you find a candidate who's truly focused on that? There is a good study from May 2023 done by Brattle called Real Reliability, the Value of Virtual Power, that each candidate could be asked about. If they have seriously looked at where the benefits are in going with solar and wind, they should be familiar with it. It shows how a distribution grid focus can save a lot of money through virtual power plants set up in microgrids with storage. But I want to mention a common argument used against residential solar by utilities, which is the cost shift one, that implies without evidence that those without rooftop solar are subsidizing those who have paid for putting solar on their roof. I would hope you would hire a general manager who understands the whole picture of benefits that distribution grid-sited residential solar provides, including economic growth, job creation, public health, energy security, resilience in climate chaos-generated outages when paired with microgrids and storage, reduction of need for more energy during peak need times, lower energy costs for everyone. There are other cost shifts that are often not talked about in the cost shift argument. There's city that are built into the system. City users paying extra costs for rural energy, customers with overhead lines subsidizing those with underground lines, etc. The hope is the new general manager understands the traditional cost shift argument used against rooftop solar of investor-owned utilities is bunk. The distribution grid gives us flexibility and cost savings. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our last scheduled speaker. We'll open it up to commissioners for comments. Sonia.
I appreciate the outpouring of support for looking for a sustainability candidate to replace Frank. I know it's going to be hard to replace Frank, but I appreciate the interest from the community in this daunting process, as Mindy pointed out earlier. So thanks for your attention.
Mindy.
I too appreciate people coming and letting us know what they want to see in the next general manager. I think that a commitment to sustainability is consistent with what we as a board have decided. And I think that sometime pretty soon we'll know who our candidate pool is. So I'm really excited to see who we get. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to those who came out and shared their thoughts on the general manager at our last meeting talking about scheduling. This was a huge concern of mine, and I know that we are on a tight schedule. So a lot of public input has been expedited is the word I'll use. So I appreciate hearing about sustainability, and those are my focuses as well. So thank you so much for coming out. And Eric, always great to hear from you, and you are just very deeply knowledgeable. So thank you for always coming forward and doing your homework as well. So thank you.
I'd like to echo the comments of the other commissioners, and also like to, you commented about the city not meeting their goals. I understand that, but also if somehow you can turn around and look at our agenda item 15 tonight, look at the backgrounder and look where we are. And I'm very proud of where we are on meeting our greenhouse gas goals and our projections. And, you know, we're 93% renewable. We've already met our operational goals. So we're doing great. And I think, and we're on the right trajectory and continue to go that way. And I don't see any reason why this board would adopt anything or hire anybody that would continue to pursue those goals.
All right. With that, I will close the public comment section. And we'll move on to item number 5, which is approval of consent calendar A.
Move to adopt consent calendar A.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Number 6 is approval of consent calendar B.
Move to adopt consent calendar B.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay, next up is City of Eugene Liaison updates. Who wants to start this? Go ahead, Mindy.
So we met with the City of Eugene, and we talked a lot about the fire hydrants and what we're going to do about that. And I know that that is something that Frank had said that staff is talking about, and we'll get updates on that as there's progress made. We also talked about the second source and just inform them about what our process is and maybe what some hurdles are and how they can support us if those hurdles remain. And I don't remember what else. I think that was the main gist of what our conversation was.
Right. Frank, did you have things that you?
Sure. Additionally, so yes, fire hydrants, yes, second source. Some of that was advocacy, understand the importance of the relationship between the two cities and the importance of looking at water in particular from a resiliency standpoint, not based on the boundaries of a city, but recognizing that when you get into situations like that design is intended for, that there is a mutual benefit to those who could be served by that. And I think that was an important piece of it. We did talk about some of the regional challenges. Mr. New just mentioned some of those relative to the forecasts across the region versus the rate of production in your traditional type of generation. It does bring up the importance of dealing with this at a distribution and community level. And I think that the executive team and management team is having a number of discussions as to what that looks like and the importance of that. It also presents opportunities for us to, and this is actually something that came up after the fact in talking with staff and leaning into the fact that there are certain tax exemptions potentially available to people in the community for certain things. And yet there's very little, if any, efficiency requirements that come along with those tax exemptions. And we think that may be an opportunity to have some negotiations with the city around that. And so a little bit more detail that would have to come before we would present that to the city. And if the city is listening in, this is not what we talked about, so they'd be surprised by this. I don't want to head them off before we even get started. But there are some opportunities there. So we talked about energy, we talked about water, we talked about potential opportunities that can come from that.
Yeah, and lastly, what I would say is that the working relationship is, I think, at a very high level between staff and between both staffs. And I think that corresponds to the policy level as well. I think when we sat in there, the leadership from the city of Eugene was very receptive to hearing from us. It was, I don't want to say it wasn't 50-50, but it was much more of us educating them on a lot of the things that we're doing that impact them, and they were very receptive to hearing about that and asked a lot of questions on those. So, yeah.
Yeah, we also talked about the importance of the fact that the utility bill is not just used to collect utility charges, that the city fees do have an impact on affordability. And we also talked a little bit about the expense that we go through to do that, and therefore a recent change in how much we're going to be charging the city for that billing, which is still efficient compared to their other options, and that'll be implemented in July, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, in July. So we talked about the importance of the utility bill from that perspective as well.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that? The last thing that I would say is, if you, over the next few months, if you think of something that you would like to have us discuss during those meetings, jot them down and get them to us before we go in, because we kind of go in there with certain ideas that have been brought to us by staff. But if there's things that you want us to ask, please let us know. Yes, John.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, we've had a discussion about when we do second source and things such as that Knickerbocker Bridge having to come down or be rebuilt because it's our bridge, and whether or not, how long that's going to be out, and whether there's any cost sharing opportunity or anything such as that. Just, I would wonder if we want to give them a heads up that that's on the horizon.
Would be a good idea. Thank you. Okay. Moving right along. Deborah, upcoming year's 2026 proposals, budget and prices. Back to them. Just a heads up here, I was noticing, or I wasn't noticing, Sonia noticed that we're quite a bit ahead on our presentation for the public hearing, which is supposed to be at 7:10. If we're still this far ahead, I might slide Jason in for the legislative update before the public hearing, just so Jason, be ready. You may be called on beforehand.
Good evening, Commissioners. Deborah Hart, AGM and CFO for the record. I'm here to answer questions, but my team has pulled together the presentation, and so I'm going to hand it off.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, Tia Marie Harwood, Financial Services Manager, and with me this evening are Adam Rue, Rates Manager, and Alicia Voorhees, Financial Planning and Analysis Supervisor. We were here before you last month to discuss the updates made to the long-term financial plans, and also brought forth the 2026 draft budgets that staff prepared. This evening, we are here to review the 2026 proposed budgets and prices, which will be followed by the first of 2 public hearings on proposed prices. After the public hearing, we'll be seeking board direction, thereby allowing staff to prepare the final 2026 budgets and price proposals for the December 2nd board meeting. The proposed 2026 budgets were developed in alignment with EWEB strategic priorities and total 492.3 million for the electric and water utilities combined. The cost of delivering essential water and electric services continues to rise due to inflation, new regulatory requirements, and the need to replace or modernize aging infrastructure. The coming year will bring continued investments in critical capital projects, and financial planning helps us to make these investments in a measured, responsible way, balancing near-term affordability with long-term sustainability. And Alicia will share more about each utility's priorities heading into 2026.
Starting with the water utility operations and maintenance budget totals approximately 32 million. This figure is approximately 4 million lower as compared to the 2025 budget as a result of winding down watershed recovery and restoration work, as well as refining shared service budget allocations. This budget supports initiatives in source protection, ongoing services to provide clean, healthy water through operations at Hayden Bridge, and service reliability through regular maintenance of the distribution system. It supports EWEB's commitment to affordability through bill assistance programs such as customer care. The water utility capital budget totals approximately 60 million and is approximately 12 million higher as compared to the 2025 budget due to tank and pipeline construction on the College Hill Reservoir, as well as the Riverfront and East 23rd transmission mains replacement and improvement. This budget supports design for a second water drinking source, investments for storage and transmission mains, and completion of advanced meter infrastructure for the water system. The budget also supports shared services updates to shared service efforts to upgrade legacy IT systems as part of the EWEB Enterprise Solutions Program. The electric utility operations and maintenance budget totals 292 million. This figure is approximately $16 million lower as compared to the 2025 budget, with lower wholesale purchase power from lower market prices as the driver. I'd like to note that along with a reduction in market purchases, there's an offsetting reduction in wholesale sales revenue. This budget supports continued progress towards decommissioning Leeburg, as well as dam safety work on EWEB's McKenzie River hydroelectric assets. It furthers system maintenance, protection, and vegetation management work, and it supports customer and bill assistance programs. The electric utility capital budget totals approximately 109 million and is $11 million higher as compared to the 2025 budget. Capital investments in substation and transmission system improvements contributed to this increase. This budget supports investments for EWEB-owned hydroelectric projects to include Carmen Smith license implementation, Leeburg Canal near-term risk reduction, and repairing the Walterville forebay. The budget also supports transmission and distribution infrastructure investments to include substation improvements, compliance-driven replacements, and telecom equipment replacements. It supports shared service efforts to upgrade legacy IT systems as well as part of the EWEB Enterprise Solutions Program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Adam to discuss proposed prices.
Thanks, Alicia. The 2026 proposals include a 6% increase for water and 3.9% for electric, increases in the overall revenue requirement for the respective utilities. The water utility increases higher for the elevation charges. The two largest customer service classes of residential and general service are both consistent with the overall increase. They vary a bit, which is typical for cost of service results. For the electric utility, the Bonneville power cost adjustment that was provided to the board as correspondence in September went into effect in November 1st, just a couple days ago. For the customer service policy, this is a temporary adjustment. For up to 1 year, the rate action would incorporate that into the base rates as proposed. In addition, the new rate classes for the McKenzie Valley service territory were developed and are being proposed here. Those increases are higher than the overall average. As discussed in September, we reviewed the fixed and variable costs, specifically for the residential electric utility. So those proposals are presented in future slides. Presented here is the water utilities adjustments by customer class. As mentioned earlier, the residential and general service are both within 100% or 1% of the overall increase. The elevation charge is the highest increase. One contract customer showed a decrease, so we are proposing to hold that at 0 to employ gradualism to avoid future rate shock. For the general service, oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. The 90% of the residential customers are in this less than 1 inch meter size. That's the majority of the customers that background showed. The other meter sizes, the overall increase was 5.1%, but since it impacted the fixed versus the variable charge differently, the range for these usage levels was 3.6 to 5.4%, within the average of 5.1%. The rate structure was left consistent with a fixed monthly charge and the tiered increasing block rates for the quantity usage. For general service customer classes, over 95% of the customers are in this less than 1 inch, 1 inch or 2 inch meters. The backgrounder also showed the 3 to 10 inch meter size impacts. The increases impacted the larger meter sizes to a larger extent due to capacity investments, specifically as the average customer class usage, or the average usage for this class is 50 kcal per month. Moving to the electric utility, this slide shows the class basis increases to support the 2026 budget. The overall impact is 3.9%, but the impacts vary by class. These increases are addition to the November increase of 3.4% that impacted residential customers by 2.7%. So it's a little lower impact for residential for the BPA power cost division. This slide shows the impact for the McKenzie Valley service territory. So absent a service territory transfer, these are the proposed impacts to, or the proposed rates that will go into effect on June 1st. Because the McKenzie Valley service territory realignment is currently under consideration between EWEB and Lane Electric, we're not proposing to implement until after the date that that's expected to go through if it doesn't go through. Effect. As presented at least. So based on some feedback in the September rate design discussion, we added some impact of qualitative factors that was in the backgrounder and then here presented as some quantitative impacts. Each of these rows represents 10% of our customer bills. So the 0 to 250 line item represents 10% of the bills in each of those. Represents roughly 10% of our customer bills. So this is the impact by those different percentile levels. This reflects the increase in the fixed monthly charge from $30 to $38.50 to reflect the cost of service results. This slide shows one of the commercial or general service customer classes. The small general service has the majority of the customers. Roughly 8,600 customers are in this group. The average usage for this class is 1,700 kilowatt hours. This shows the bill impacts for 5 kilowatt demand, 20 and 30 kilowatts of demand with different kilowatt hour usage levels. So this represents a lot of small commercial businesses and a variety of different majority of our customers that are commercial customers. Thanks. So the top graph shows the EWEB electric rates. The increase For the Bonneville power cost adjustments included in the current rates, the effect of this rate adjustment at this usage level would be roughly $3 per month. The Bonneville power cost adjustment was $6 per month at this usage level. The chart on the right shows the impact of the water cost of service analysis and increase of $2 per month. UWEB's position remains relatively low among the comparators, even with the significant investments in economic pressures. The combined impact of both of these adjustments is $5 at these usage levels, in addition to the $6, roughly $6 a month increase for the electric utility for the Bonneville pass-through. With that, I think we're turning to the public hearing.
Okay, I will open it up for questions or comments. John.
Help me understand, we have one private water company, and that's Willamette, and we're overcharging them by 6% because they're the only ones that not getting the bump. And this is, I think, the second year in a row that we've done that to them, and I'm just wondering why. Why just that one, and it's a private company?
Yeah, the biggest impact for their adjustment is based on their usage patterns. So they had significant leak in their historic data that's used to inform the cost of service analysis. We know that that was driving some anomalous factors in the cost of service adjustment analysis. And so we wanted to hold them flat until we have more consistent data that's kind of post the impact of the extended leak.
And it also shows they only have 7 customers, but they use 3 million gallons.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm just looking at, on page 12, that it just says that their customer counts are 7 for Willamette Water Company. And I'm just wondering if versus 47,000 for EWEB. I'm just wondering how that could be. Sorry, I didn't catch this earlier. I just wondered.
Oh, sure. Those are they're served under larger meters that are then they're taking and serving their customers. Similar to the water districts.
So they're like, they have a large, like for a mobile home park, because I know it's all at Goshen and part of Crestwell and all that area on I-5. So there's a whole lot more than 7 customers. Are they reselling it?
So if we're providing them through the 7 meters and then
they're
reselling.
And we're not raising their rates.
I'm sorry.
We're not raising their rates, but we're raising everybody.
We're raising to Willamette, or no, we're not raising the rates to Willamette Water Company.
Okay, and just a comment, historically on the electric chart where we are on the affordability, the only ones we're below are the 2 IOUs, Sacramento and Blatchley Lane. And you look at that, and we used to be way over there to the left, and now we're creeping way up to the right. And back when we adopted the policy that we're not going to let rates go past inflation. And I know that we're doing everything we can, but I think for me, I'm going to push in the future to keep rates as low as we can because they're getting out of hand again, in my opinion. Thank you.
Tim.
I think there was a commissioner before me just to.
We'll all get around to it.
Okay, sorry, just want to confirm. I do have a few questions. A few slides back, you highlight under electrics, small general service, medium general service, large. Can you describe the difference between those 3 of general service? What constitutes a small, medium, or large?
Oh, it's based on their kilowatt of demand. So if their measured demand goes above a certain threshold 3 months in a 12-month period, then that would set their level. So if you're for the difference between small and medium is 30 kilowatts. So if you're at 35 kilowatts for 3 months out of a 12-month period, then you would move to medium. Otherwise, if you're under that, then you're small. So it's based on consumption or peak demand.
Thank you. And you, when we were talking about water, you verbally talked about the majority of customers fall under a certain amount of gallons per. Can you repeat that?
Sure. It's the meter size serving the customers. So for water customers, their capacity or demand related service is based on the meter size delivering water to the customer. So we price that demand based on the meter size. So if you're a less than 1 inch meter, you pay a less monthly charge than if you're a 2 inch meter. Theory being that if we've installed infrastructure to serve you at the 2 inch meter size, there's a lot of assets kind of that are being set aside to serve that capacity.
I heard a percent, and I think it was somewhere in the 90% of the majority of customers fall under a certain metering size or metering, how many gallons they're using. So can you, what was that number again? I'm so sorry. 1 inch.
Yeah, so that was for the residential customers. The majority of them are under 1 inch. So there could be a handful of customers that are larger if they have a lot of outdoor irrigation or.
Okay, and then on the slides for the electric residential bill impacts, I think on your end, it's page 22. Is it possible to go to that? It's the,
Oh, sorry.
I think one more, to the right. There we go. I'm not understanding this, and I'm hoping you can explain this to me. This feels backwards of the usage range at 0 to 250 has the largest difference of proposed prices than the customers who are on the percentile of usage range of 1801 and over. Can you explain why that is? Why the customers who are at the lowest usage range, so I'm thinking like single folks in one home or folks who are working really hard to keep their energy bills lower, why that they're being charged the highest amount of difference versus the consumers who are using the most?
Sure. So the proposed the recommendation is aligned with our cost of service analysis. So it's not really making an assessment on like attributes about those people specifically. They're anything about their demographic information. Is just purely looking at like the cost of serving those customers. If we look at the customer specific infrastructure or costs related to like billing and services, and we look at all of those costs that are on a customer specific basis, we're aligning those costs with the rates, which is impacting the fixed monthly charge to a greater extent than the volumetric charge. Conversely, the Bonneville power adjustment was 100% in that volumetric rate. So the chart would have been flipped if we just looked at the same bill impact for the Bonneville pass through. So kind of the combined effect of both of those. This is showing the fixed cost increase that we're implementing for the budget rates, and the Bonneville pass through was all around the volumetric rate. So the combined of those kind of mirrors each other. If that makes sense.
Couple of questions. So the upriver sale, if we did go through and sell that, the way that it's budgeted currently, is it essentially revenue neutral if it went through, so we don't get any of the benefits of it because it's separated out with this proposed separate rate?
Yeah, so for the proposal is for these to go into effect like post the timing of the transfer. So we would be adjusting their rates on February 1st, similar to everyone else, because like the new class isn't proposed to go into effect until June 1st. So the February 1st increase would go into effect with them. So it affects every customer is going to have the rate adjustment in February 1st. So the impact of the incremental revenue isn't something that we would see unless the transfer doesn't go through. But then we would propose the adjustment being June 1st.
Okay.
And that's just
So if it doesn't happen, then the proposal is we implement these. If it does happen, then this doesn't matter.
Correct.
Okay, but if this doesn't matter, I mean, we've been subsidizing, we've never had this separate rate. We've talked about it for a number of years. We put it on hold after the upriver fire in consideration of the situation that happened there. Are the other rates, would they be positively impacted if it's sold, or because of this, it's neutral?
So there would be no rate change for our other customers in June. Some of these costs will go away immediately upon transfer. We would see lower fuel costs. a little bit of staffing, tree trimming, and then over time, we expect to see a long-term value through risk reduction, better concentration on our urban areas. I don't know if Frank wants to add to that.
I would just be more specific. You're not going to see a tick up or a tick down within the Eugene community, whether this happens or not.
Okay, that's fair. Okay. And then the secondary source rate impact is not built into this, and I'm curious as to why and when do we determine that or not?
I'll jump in again. Thanks, Commissioner. What this does include is the design and the continuation of any land use or permitting requirements that we have. We have scheduled between April and May a whole series of discussions with the board. It's probably a regular session, and I believe it's also a work session to talk about whether we push forward on the second source, which includes a number of things. The rate impacts specifically, we'll have a lot better feel for the exact costs as well as economic improvement opportunities. And then the discussion around not just the raw costs, but who pays and how. So some rate design discussions, including SDCs. And so if it's impacting or preserving capacity, it might be treated differently than just base volume. So those discussions planned for April or May.
Okay, so essentially we do have some portion of it baked in so that we can get to that next decision point. It's not nothing, is it?
That's
okay.
Correct.
That's great. And then I noticed in the document, so that we haven't covered it too much here, that there was a proposed $9 fixed rate increase on the base rate. I'd like to talk a little bit about that and what I mean, I think I know the general cause is always the fixed cost, but that's a pretty giant increase. And so I'm just, what is the driver on that particular one? Because that hits people even if they're trying to conserve.
Sure, and that's not necessarily driven by an incremental change from 2026 relative to 2025. I think it's been a legacy cost that we've included as volumetric costs instead of in the fixed charge. So we've over time, over the last at least 10 to 15 years, been incrementally increasing the fixed charge to avoid that cost shift and to kind of position ourselves for those future rate design discussions. So this isn't necessarily an incremental change. The costs that comprise the fixed charge for the electric utility, at least, we have those customer specific costs like billing, customer service that are kind of put in the fixed monthly charge, as well as a portion of our distribution system. So cost related to like maintaining overhead lines and distribution assets, a portion of those get allocated on a customer basis. So we kind of cover some infrastructure costs. And so that's been the way that our cost of service modeling has been done. It's just we haven't fully recovered those in our fixed monthly bill over time. So this proposal is a step up to kind of fully align those instead of incrementally, like how we've been moving over the last few years.
I mean, how much have we increased it over the last few years, like each year? Because this is like a
I think the last one was
$30
$5 increase from 25 to 30, if I remember correctly.
Frank, you want to respond?
Yeah, certainly. So there's a number of reasons. If you do look at the chart, I believe Commissioner Morris was talking about, you will recognize that volume still, your bill is still based on volume. The reason the difference is that for a number of years, we have not fully recovered the fixed cost. The fixed cost, the very first electron, is the most expensive to deliver for a number of reasons. Also in the long term, we're trying to get better alignment between cost and price so that we can offer incentives that align with electrification, energy efficiency, peak mitigation, a lot of the things that we would actually experience on the volumetric side. We want to be able to reward for that. It is also important to note that volume in those different buckets does not equate to income. There are just as many high users, low income, as there are low users, low income. In fact, the lowest bracket, that below 250, are likely people who spend part of the year not here. And so there's a number of things that the data points to that don't correlate. But the reason is, and we're kind of there, each utility is a bit different. We're somewhere in the middle on the fixed charge. Lane Electric, for example, is I believe $39 or $40. Blatchley's in the $60 range. Just different utilities have different approaches to that. And we feel in the long term is better to align cost and price, including the fixed component and the variable component. So we're catching up, if you want to classify it that way.
Indeed.
So if we were to true up that fixed cost now, so we have a $9 increase. If we were to true it up now, what would that number be?
So this is the proposals to do that now, to adjust it for our fixed customer specific costs. We had that discussion in last September where we talked about putting some additional delivery charges in the fixed monthly charge. So it isn't going that far. It's just going for the customer specific costs.
And then I know you've shown us the projections for the future years, but so if we kind of true up that fixed cost now, then next year we don't have a jump like that, correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. And in the past, we've just done it more incrementally.
A few dollars at a time. So
Yeah.
this really trues us up.
Commissioner, I would also add that future increases will be based on the costs that drive those increases. There could be costs that we're incurring that are more capacity related. Some of those start to get into what's your demand charge. For example, on the commercial side, it's more of a volumetric component. We call it delivery on the residential side. It depends on in the future years what is actually driving the investments. So it's not a guarantee that it could be slightly one way or the other. That's something that we continue to have to look at as far as what are those investments realizing for us, and again, kind of who pays for what kind of investments that we're making, whether that's a fixed charge or a volumetric charge. And even there, argue about internally. I'm looking at Adam because we've all had some arguments as to what's a fixed component and what's a variable component. And so this is kind of where we think is a good point to land, although I could argue that the fixed component could be even higher, but I think we're pretty happy with what we've included at this point.
Thanks. And just to follow up on the question that Sonia asked, so if we did the McKenzie Valley territory transfer, is that neutral to our budget? If we get rid of them as customers, what is the impact to our budget?
So for 2026, there is no impact to the budget. There will be some costs that are in this cost of service allocated to the McKenzie Valley that will be reabsorbed. We will be doing some catch-up work and evaluating what that change really means to our territory. There also will be costs that will fall off immediately. Yes.
You're getting ahead of us on the agenda item here, but I would just say when we're really kind of diving into the details of a potential McKenzie realignment, over the long term, we think it offers a lot of value, both in avoided cost, risk mitigation. There's a number of things. In the near term, there's going to be a few things that probably apply a little pricing pressure, and other things that probably apply some pricing relief. Those, to Deborah's point, in the near term are probably kind of a wash, and we're going to have to take a look when we go forward as to those. We want more benefit. We want fair benefit. I'm not going to call it. If you say rate neutral to an accountant, it has a different term than when we say really long-term value, which we think is fair. A balance of the price we're getting, the services we're providing that they're going to pay for ongoing versus some of the things associated with power supply and other stuff. So probably nothing in the near term that shows up on a bill that says, here's a McKenzie Valley component, but we're going to have to manage that. We're going to have to manage it actively.
Thank you. two more questions. I'll be quick. On the chart that shows what our electric rates are compared to other utilities. I know we've also talked about that other utilities are going to be raising their rates as well, and this does not reflect that, right? These are current now, and we are going to be going up average $3 a month EWEB, but we don't know what the other utilities are going to, correct?
That is correct.
And
Except Frank maybe has some intelligence here.
I'm sorry. So in discussions with other general managers, many of those, I'm going to say at least half of the ones I talked to are a greater increase than we are. Ours within the Bonneville Balancing Authority area is probably fairly typical. Some of the others, it's almost like the more resources you have outside of Bonneville, at least in the public power sector, the more you're seeing pricing pressures. That's why you see even the IOUs seeing, 30-35% increases. Some of the other utilities that have a more diverse portfolio are seeing slightly different pressures, but it's probably within consumer-owned utility pretty similar.
I think something that might be helpful is like 6 months from now or something, it could be part of correspondence or something, but if you were to update us on this instead of having to wait the whole next year, I just think that could be interesting.
In the July materials.
Yep, great, perfect. And then one last thing is that for the water side, this budget includes the watershed recovery fee, which is $5 a month. Is that correct? $3 a month. And that is expiring at the end of 2026. No,
Mid-year.
mid-year. Okay, great. That's all. Thank you.
So, I'm trying to add components here. So given that we have discussions, I believe it's teed up for March. Might be April because we shifted it. I can't remember if we shifted in month because we wanted to incorporate the Pentaplume update. That's going to be an opportunity for the board to discuss if in the long term you want to look at additional source protection into a budget, even though the source recovery has fulfilled its mission. Some of that will come into play if the Willamette plant goes ahead. There's obviously investments we would want to make in the Willamette system. And so kind of that spring timing for the source protection, having a decision on whether something continues in lieu of that fee, but that does come off in July of 26.
So if we extended that, then that would be a further increase from July.
Yeah, I'll just give you management's perspective is because that fee was created for a certain period of time for a certain purpose, that purpose has been fulfilled. We see that sunsetting. If the board wants to create either an alternative within our budget or a separate type of mechanism, that would be for the board's discussion. But we actually believe that that has fulfilled its purpose. It's met the resolution, and the resolution expires in July. So we're seeing that discontinue as a specific fee. The board, in the meantime, can have discussions around if there's some alternative approach to it that you'd like to take.
Okay, I'll start with my easy question first. On the PERS increase, we saw it go from 25 to 27.7. Do you have you gotten any indications from the PERS board what more we're going to be coming up from? Because we went from 21% in 24 to 25 and 25, and now we're at almost 28. Any indication from the PERS board what their trajectory is?
We'll have a new evaluation coming out next year, and that'll give us an idea. We do forecast increases. I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but we do plan for regular increases.
And they're capped at like 6%, right? They can increase that.
No,
Oh,
There are some collar and double collar rules, but we are not limited to a 6% increase.
okay. Now I'll get into the other one. So of the 7.4% increase that we've had with the two different rates, is the increase to basic charge in that 7.4%, or is the increase on the basic charge on top of that?
That's included.
That's included.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna talk about it. You know, Tim brought it up initially. And Frank made some points that it's not necessarily regressive, but it is regressive, especially on smaller account holders. And by adopting this budget with that $8.50 increase in the residential and the increases in the other service categories, we're making a policy decision to make our rates regressive. That's what we're doing if we adopt this program. Now, it's a little bit late in the game for us to be changing that, but I think that is a policy discussion that is worthy of having. Would we rather see some of that shift more to volumetric, and what are the costs and the benefits of doing that? You know, you say it may impact what we want to do in the future, but as somebody who sees this as a small account holder, I've got a warehouse where I rent a thing, and my basic charge is $60 and my usage is $6. And so I see it as being a regressive part of our rate structure. Now, I'm not, again, the reason that it jumps up to me is because of the increase that we have here, but I do see this as a policy that staff is putting forward that I would like to have a discussion at some point.
Yeah, President Borowski, I think the policy decision and the policy direction that we got probably about a year ago was not about the regressiveness of it. It was about the alignment with cost. Cost in its very nature with utilities does have a regressive element to it because of the fixed amount of cost that we're incurring. And the board's direction was to at first align with cost and then develop incentives that promote efficiency and electrification and some of these other, I'll say, demand side programs that would have value, of which the value could then be returned to both the recipient and the community. And so the policy decision, as well as the principles around sufficiency, stability, the more you put into the volumetric charge, the more variable your revenue becomes and dependent on weather, for example. So there are implications, but I think management has taken the board's direction previously and said that alignment with cost is initial steps followed by developing incentives to promote good consumer behavior that has benefit for them and for all.
Okay, and thank you for that. And I guess then the takeaway that I get from this is when we talk about that in the grand concept, this is what it comes down to. You know, when we talked about it a year ago in September, and we said, yeah, I think that the cost should be put in there. This is what it means. It means an $8.50 per increase, and so it's just it opened my eyes.
Yeah, one distinction as well, because I certainly agree with your observations. I think Commissioner Morris has the same observations. The purity of the cost price alignment is the rate design portion of it. Next month, we're going to talk in more detail around the programmatic support that we will develop for certain classes of customers. That can be very targeted, and that can be something that the board also addresses from a policy perspective that can help certain parts of our population that the board believes is warranted. So there is a kind of a purity around consumption and driving consumption behavior on the rate side, alignment with cost. separate from that, the programmatic side that can then supplement and take care of some of the community values and benefits that the board wishes to pursue and do that very specifically.
Okay. And then I guess the last point I would make is I would be aligned with Mindy and Sonia in the fact, and we've seen this in other instances where we just fall behind and then we try and make it all up in one fell swoop. And it just, if we can try it, you know, if we look, I know doing the full cost of service analysis is time consuming and expensive, obviously. You know, that's why we haven't done them as often as we need to probably. But if we can make them more incremental rather than, you know, 35, 40% jump in a single charge, that would be helpful. Mindy and then Sonia.
Just really quick, I think what would be helpful, at least for me in the future, is that when we look at when we're looking at changing like fixed costs or things like that, if maybe in some of the background information, we could be given some scenarios, because when you do look at this chart, the electric residential bill impacts, it looks highly regressive, but hearing Frank say that some of those people in the highest, the lowest, or the ones, people that are paying the most could be people that aren't here all year round. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're lower income. And so I don't know who uses less than 152 kilowatts per hour. You know, this isn't my world, so I can't look at this chart and know like, oh, this is the type of customer that does that. So I think just in the future, it would be helpful if there was like maybe some fleshing out and some scenarios to help us better understand who these customers are, rather than just a 10% band on a chart.
And we are working on data segmentation.
Great.
But again, there's not a correlation between income and usage. Those are limited income residents utilize electricity at very similar rates to the total population. So at the higher usage ends, they are no longer subsidizing lower usage customers.
Sonia.
Well, so we had the report that came out that talked a bit about our, like the rental housing versus the low income. I mean, I think it should be a part of this discussion if we can bring some of that information back to the picture. And I guess I was holding my comments about direction because I thought we were doing that after public comment, but you kind of jumped into it on how you feel about it. So I'm going to jump into it too, because this is exactly why I raised the comment. I think that we should use more gradualism in getting to that fixed rate charge instead of doing a full 33%. And I know that that will then impact the other rates because you have to get the cost somewhere. And so then that idea then shifts the costs that we have on a kilowatt hour rate basis. But we don't want to do that unless we understand kind of the impact on those lowest income folks. And it's just, if we weren't in the current times where there are so many people that are, you know, unemployed, that are just barely thriving, you know, we wouldn't have this, maybe it wouldn't be as dire a discussion, but $9 could really make or break somebody. So I do want to be cognizant of that next month when we vote on this. And I think it's going to be important to see this scenario versus the other scenario where that's broken down and what that impact might be, if that's possible.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we will have an update next month on our ECC programs. So I think you have to look at the rates in combination with the programs. And if you recall the Venn diagram that I drew when you drew down into looking for rentals, low income, high usage, high bill combinations, we've done an analysis to narrow that down to a very specific percentage. And so, and then looking to make adjustments in the programs to help with the issues that you're talking about. Because if we don't do that, we can be the unintended consequence, we can be helping people that don't need it, which restricts help from those who do.
So for me, I mean, if I look at this and we could say, okay, the distribution of, you know, the ECC CARES money is in this range. I mean, that would be helpful to see, because then it's like, all right, yes, they're charged X, but they get $280 off. So really the full impact to that particular group of people is fully mitigated. I mean, we can't see that with this. So
Yeah.
I just saw a little head nod. It seems like you're working on it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I can look over my shoulder to get the expertise head nod if I need to. So
Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my goal is not to beat up staff over trying to take 5 different sets of numbers and combine them all into one. And I'm not implying that any of my colleagues here are doing that, but I also exist in this space in a day job, and I understand how obscenely difficult it is to get and organize and coordinate these numbers. So I truly understand. I think the one thing that I do see here, especially with this screen, is I cannot imagine a universe in which like a single family, an apartment customer who is just living their life is at that 1801 and over. That just feels like it is a very large unit that is using those funds. You know, these are the McMansions up in who knows where, but that is where my brain is looking at that difference there, where there's a refund of $17 or 17 cents, excuse me. And recognizing, again, you know, highlighting my day job in, you know, especially with seniors on Social Security, $9 is the difference between housed and homeless. Like there is a very clear path there for a lot of our very low income community who just can't shoulder this burden. And I think it's worthy of significant consideration. I am deeply interested in next month rate design conversation and our program design conversation and how we're addressing that. And also just recognizing that the slide right after this talks about our general service bill impacts, and that disparity of that 17% difference for 0 to 250 does not seem to be the same reflection for our general service and our commercial businesses. So it is a cause for concern. From my perspective, for my ward, for the people that we serve. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, okay. And lastly, you know, I would like to say I'm a perfect example. I brought up my basic charge that I'm getting charged. I can't afford that, right? But it brought it to my, you know, when I looked at that bill, I just rented this place, and it's like, okay, oh, now if I was living in an apartment that had low usages, because a lot of apartments, their kilowatt hours are very low, you know, that's what brought it to the front of my mind, was seeing the disparity of somebody with a low usage having their bill impacted that much. So that's why, and I am the case of somebody that can afford it, right? I'm lucky enough to be in that position, but I know that there are people out there that aren't as fortunate as I, and I want to make sure that what we do going forward looks out for all of our customers. John?
So if we're going to have this further discussion, which I think is warranted, then can you give us an example? I mean, because I can't imagine a residence in any domicile, we're 600, 800 square feet using less than 600 kilowatt. I mean, you got a refrigerator, you got hot water, you got lights, you got a stove. Can you give us examples of what that kilowatt usage would be for a studio apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment, things such as that? Because I think that's where we're going. We're not going with people storing cars. We're going with people where they live. And if we're trying to make that adjustment, I think we need to be fair to that conversation about, you know, what is that basic? Because I couldn't imagine any residential not using 250. I mean, just to heat the hot water or run a refrigerator.
Frank?
Yeah, I think there's what we will do, Commissioner Brown, other commissioners, is to bring back some examples. I think it was referred to as scenarios in combination with some of the things we're looking to do programmatically. The thing that I want to caution us about is developing prices and rates based on who we think should pay more and who we think should pay less. These are the analysis of where the costs drive it. And so we know that businesses have certain cost profiles, number of accounts, and other things. And if we're deciding we want to charge this group more than that group, that creates a very dangerous precedent going forward. Now, we also understand that we have impacts on people, and we want to exercise gradualism, and we want to be fair in how we're pricing this. And it is, the more you use, the more you pay. But I think the full context, what I'm hearing from the board is, and we love numbers, by the way, Commissioner Moore, so we can do this all day long. We do need to provide some more context relative to sort of use cases, examples, as well as programmatic impacts, to give the board a little bit greater view of the different scenarios. And so that's, I guess, kind of the advice and feedback that I'm hearing is more context, more idea of kind of who this affects, how it affects them in combination with some of the program knowledge that we're developing.
I had a couple of comments just to address some of the questions. The first was in September, we provided some information on the overall customer class, residential customer class versus limited income. The one area where there was significant difference was in the very low usage. And I think that's kind of to John's point. The limited income at the low usage there was less customers at that very low 0 to 250. And we were hypothesizing that those are probably disproportionately like rentals of people that aren't there, people that are part-time here. So that might not be representing limited income in that lowest usage bracket that has the highest increase. And then the other point was just, we did see people in each bracket at the limited income level. So there are people right now that are paying $314 a month that are limited income that are potentially subsidizing that lower usage customers. So their limited income, their bills are $315. We're saying to not raise those more if there's that subsidy and make their bills higher. So that's kind of the even though people are struggling with the $9 increase or $7 increase at the lowest level, there's probably more people, we think there's probably people struggling to pay the $315 that are limited income. That might not be McMansions, they might just be a lot of people living in a small, inefficient house. So that's kind of there are people that are limited income programs in that bracket though.
Great. Thank you all for the conversation. We didn't have to push it up. We're actually a little bit past time, as my colleague is showing me right now. Yes, Frank.
I don't know if you wanted to double check to see if there was any public input. Probably should go through that.
Yeah, no, that was my next item.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, next item on the agenda is a public hearing on proposed budgets and prices. Do we have anybody signed up? And this, again, for you people in the audience, if you didn't know, there is a public hearing on what we just discussed. If you'd like to sign up and talk to it, feel free to raise your hand and we'll have you come on up. So I'm going to open the public hearing. See if there's anybody who wants to yak at us. All right, I don't see anybody, so I will close the public hearing. Now, we move on to, this seems redundant.
So how we typically would do it is we would give the presentation, go to public comment, and then ask questions.
Okay.
But we did questions.
Well, okay, so if there's anybody else who has more questions or discussions on this or direction, I guess we'll do the Tim rule. Is there anything from us that you didn't get that you would like to know about?
Question for you. I heard a combination of asks, and I want to make sure that collectively we've gathered what Julie's group will be bringing forward in December and coupled with ours.
Well, I think to be nice, I got more than what I bargained for in this one. But all great. I really do recognize that this is the most impactful area that we commonly address. Combination of staff and the board and the guidance becomes really important. The context becomes really important. I have lots of notes. I'll be working with Anna and Julie's group and Greg on some of the programmatic impacts. And then we'll take a look at a couple of adjustments, options, and scenarios on the rate side. So it was very valuable input and really healthy debate and back and forth, and I really appreciate that. So,
So correct me if I'm wrong, the budgets are based on a 90% water year, correct? Because we used to be 85. And we've had very, very long debates and heated discussions about that in prior boards. But I'm looking at these statistics in the next presentation about from 2019 to 25, 5 of the 7 last years were below 90%. 2023 and 2024 were the 72nd and 71st worst years out of the last 78 years. And we're budgeting that we're going to get money that we're not going to get. We're spending money because we used to do 85%. We had a big fight over it. I'm Ron Farmer. I'm going to send a position paper to or his email about why we shouldn't go from 85% to 90%. But can you, when we go into the future, I'd like to be convinced of why we're still budgeting for money that we're not getting, because the water years are getting worse, and we're trending back to where we were at 85%. And I don't know why.
I'm gonna go Deborah, then Frank.
Oh,
I know. Jump the queue.
Thank you. Well, I did want to acknowledge that ask, that we will bring more information about the risks that we're mitigating. That includes prices as well as volume. So it's not all centered on weather. It is an area of concern for us that we continue to watch. And we'll make notes to have a more robust discussion when we bring back the long-term financial plan around those assumptions.
I'll answer your question, Commissioner. The conservatism that used to be captured solely in the 90% water versus 85% water is now captured in what we call the contribution margin risk factor. It's some built-in conservatism that captures the combination of low water, low consumption, or in our case, that's where low market prices. And so it is built into what's generating the margin and the reserve to cover that 90% water risk. So it is in the budget. It's just not called out by itself as a 85 to 90%. It's a combination of 3 different aspects that we built into a conservative number on the wholesale revenue side. I will convince you at some point, right before I retire.
Other questions or comments? Sonia.
So I just wanted to get head nods because I don't think that we, I expressed an interest in potentially lowering or having some more gradualism, but I don't know that we got great direction that the board wanted that, or if there were just 1 or 2 of us. So I was just curious if Frank was going to actually, if you all were going to bring back something that was gradualism continued on the fixed rate, or if that's not the board's desire.
I personally can hold my nose and move forward with this budget.
I feel like we did discuss this, like we've seen all the charts about the kind of the truing up, and while I don't like the idea of giving such a big jump, I do think like at some point we need to true it up so that we're not constantly playing catch up. So I think that I would support what we've proposed, just so that we don't continuously get ourselves into this situation.
I would support a conversation of gradualism.
In the future about gradualism, but about this budget, I mean, this isn't creating money that we don't have to spend. This is money that we have to spend. We have to keep the operations going. We have to keep doing what we're doing with this. And it is and we're going to hold our nose while we do it. But I think I agree with Sonia and Tim about stopping this process and doing it in the future about gradualism. But I think for this particular jump, I think to me, that train's left the station. We all discussed this. We've got a budget. We're ready to go. And we've already stopped a lot of projects. And if we don't do this, I mean, if we cut it back, then what? Then what's going to give?
What was going to give? Sorry. Since I posed the question, if you don't mind. I mean, from my perspective, it wasn't a change on that. It was that you would adjust the other rates to accommodate it. So it's not changing the size of the pie, although I would love for it to decrease. I know that we're not in that place. So thank you. I appreciate the thought because I wasn't sure after I raised that where we were at.
Right.
One clarification, Commissioner Carlson, are you looking specifically at the basic charge on the residential side? Is that
was the basic charge on the residential side,
Okay.
but it sounds like there's not enough interest from the full board to make that happen. So sounds like we'll move forward as is and we won't need that, but I would still like to be able to see the impact of the EC Cares funds on each of those brackets so we can get a better sense of where the true need is and how much we're covering.
I think we're consistent with that for sure.
Okay.
And during check-ins with commissioners, I can give you a little bit of what the trade-off between fixed and variable rate impacts kind of look like. You know, does this kind of dollar translate into this kind of variable cost? Just so you have a feel going forward.
All right, thank you. I just want to close by saying this was a good discussion. I appreciate it. And, you started off the presentation talking about this is a $480 million budget. So it deserves this type of a conversation. When we get a packet that's 100 pages long on the budget and it's $480 million, I don't want it to end up as a consent calendar. Yay, I'm passing this on. This is what affects our employees, our customers, and the whole community. So having this type of a conversation is absolutely warranted. And I appreciate all the work that staff's done to put it together and the robust conversation we had as a board. So with that, is there anything else you need?
Thank you for the conversation.
We don't need anything, but I would also just like to thank commissioners because we don't approach these as a rubber stamp. We do approach these as we want to get our ducks in a row so that we feel like we understand the questions and the trade-offs. And so it is very valuable to us. And we will bring back information next month that we think is just that much more useful. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. We've got item number 12, the upcoming legislative session preview. This would be Jason.
All right, hopefully I'm coming in loud and clear and you can see me okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, good evening. It's good to see you all. For the record, I'm Jason Huser, EWEB's Public Policy and Government Affairs Director. I was with you all, I guess it was September, to talk a little bit about what we thought was going to be happening in the 2026 session. Of course, I hadn't seen any bill drafts at the time. So this evening is a status update and perhaps a report card of sorts on one of the two bills that we're watching, carbon cap and trade. Next slide, please.
We don't have slides.
Oh, are the slides showing?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, all right. And this one, it's just a picture. I always want to have one picture in. Next slide, please. All right, the first bill we'll be talking about is a status update on carbon cap and trade legislation. I told you before in September, this one's a long shot. I would still say it's the long shot. I've upgraded its chances from single digits. I'm willing to go to 10%, maybe a little bit more. More than likely, this is going to be a dress rehearsal for the long session in 2027. But I can absolutely tell you there is a bill draft being worked on right now. There will absolutely be a bill introduced in the 2026 session It will have a co-sponsor from at least one legislator in each political party, and it will absolutely have public hearings and be worked on. It certainly is the opening chapters of what I expect will be a more serious effort and a greater chance of passage in the long 2027 session. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the design elements that EWEB cares about. The first one, point of regulation. We've, for a long time, always advocated that the best point of regulation is to go as far upstream as possible in the electric sector. There's a real journey here on the point of regulation. There was a 2017 bill that was downstream, load-based, retail electric load. It was probably a reflection of a world we lived in at the time where other policies like the Renewable Portfolio Standard, as well as DEQ, greenhouse gas reporting protocols, were all load-based, retail load-oriented. It was familiar to people. People like what some things that are familiar. We spent a lot of time educating folks on why that was not a very effective way to reduce emissions in the electric sector. I'm happy to say that in 2019, when the bill returned, after very vigorous and even bruising debate at times, EWEB played a big role in negotiating a midstream hybrid approach for the point of regulation. That was better than downstream, but not especially satisfying either when we knew a true upstream point of regulation was superior. Well, I feel like EWEB's done a lot of work and educated people, but the biggest thing that's changed the conversation in Oregon on this topic is what the state of Washington did in 2021 when they passed the Climate Commitment Act. They chose a true upstream point of regulation, modeled very closely after California's upstream point of regulation. I think it's fair to say that sort of ended the debate. Regional linkage, as you know, is very important. I think now that California and Washington are so aligned in their program design, it gave Oregon nowhere to go. And it's actually, there really hasn't even been that much debate or disagreement this time around with stakeholders in the electric sector. So I'm happy about that. It was a bruising fight in the past. I'm happy not to have that type of back and forth at this time around. Moving along, there is some work to be done on definitions of specified sources of electricity. Specifically, there needs to be a provision that a claim to a specified source of electricity, that specified just means it's either a definite technology or fuel, or that it comes from a specific system of resources like the Bonneville Power Administration's system, which is very low carbon. Anytime there's a claim about a specified source, it needs to be accompanied by a written contract between the buyer and the seller. That's very important for certainty for buyers and sellers. It's also a component that helps command a premium for clean electricity sources like hydropower. This is very important to Bonneville. It may be important to EWEB as well. If Bonneville is able to get a premium in a carbon pricing market, which, by the way, that's intentional. A well-designed environmental program on carbon will give clean resources a premium. Bonneville, if they can get a premium, that improves their secondary revenues when they sell surplus electricity. BPA has cost-based rates, so those secondary revenues can be funneled in to help try to keep rates lower for Bonneville customers. So that's something we care about. We're in okay shape, but there's a little bit of work to be done to refine the language on written contracts. The next topic is free carbon allowances. Right now, what I'm seeing in the bill draft, there are free allowances that would be allocated to consumer-owned utilities like EWEB. The details on the methodology would be left to rulemaking. I think it's expected that there would be an allocation of free allowances. Again, the allowances are a permit to emit a ton of carbon. These allowances would be allocated on a utility's electric load and emissions forecast. For EWEB, that's going to be a pretty familiar thing. We probably already do this sort of thing as part of the IRP process. For other utilities that don't do IRPs, they get most of their power from most or all of their power from Bonneville. Bonneville may voluntarily play a role in assisting those utilities with the forecasts. Lastly, by the way, I'll pause for a moment just to say on those three, I feel really good about this. I won't do the ABC grading, but I think these are all very acceptable outcomes. They're very consistent with what EWEB knows to be best practices for designing a carbon cap and trade program. I think they all facilitate regional linkage to California and Washington. So feeling pretty good about what we're seeing in the draft there. The last one is one that I do want to flag because I think it's really important for us to step up our efforts on advocacy and education on this topic. It's the matter of revenue recycling. Revenue recycling is a concept where revenues that are collected in a carbon cap and trade program are returned back to the economic or societal sectors from which they're collected from, often to help those sectors pay for greenhouse gas emission reduction measures. If program revenue isn't recycled at all, if there was zero revenue recycling, that revenue was used for general government purposes unrelated to emission reductions, it can effectively double the cost of the program to the Oregon economy and Oregonians. This is because compliance entities would face not only the cost of paying for carbon allowances, but would also face the cost of paying for greenhouse gas reduction measures without help from the carbon program revenues. And we know all this because it was a component of a study that EWEB co-sponsored in 2017, performed by the economics firm E3. We studied the least cost approaches to policy approaches at the state level to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Revenue recycling is a key component that makes carbon pricing the least cost policy. It's been kind of a bedrock principle for EWEB to support least cost approaches. So there's a big unknown on whether or not revenue recycling is going to be a component of the program or to what extent. And so I think it's a pretty consensus staff position at EWEB that we would want to withhold support for the bill until we know more about how the program revenue would be used. And I think we have an opportunity to try to educate folks on just why revenue recycling is so important to a well-designed carbon program. And I've been talking with people on the House and Senate Energy Committees, but I'm happy to continue to expand our outreach and education efforts to other legislators as well, with the time we have left between now and the upcoming legislative session. So that's the story on carbon. If it's all right, I'll take questions at the end if you can wait. I also wanted to talk about solar consumer protection. This bill is familiar to you because I talked about it in September, and it's also a repeat from 2025, a bill that was hung up for technical reasons and didn't get over the finish line. All the folks that reached a consensus support position on this bill last session, and crucially, that includes the Oregon Solar Industries Association. We've all teamed up again to bring the bill back for the 2026 session. I'm very confident about the chances of passage. We have the bill draft. There's just a few last minute tweaks that we're making. Some of the key components that would protect Oregon consumers include a 72-hour right of rescission, a right to cancel. That's to address high pressure sales tactics. There's also a required model written disclosure that includes important information that consumers would need. For example, a good faith utility bill savings estimate using the local utility rate and the utilities policy on the disposition of surplus net meter generation. Also informing customers that if they don't have a storage component, the installation will not provide power during outages. Transparency on tax credits, letting people know that if they don't have a tax liability, they may not be able to avail themselves to those credits. I think it even it has a special message about if you're on a fixed income, you very likely may not be able to take advantage of tax credits. Important information for consumers. There's increased enforcement authority for DOJ. This model written disclosure is sort of a safe harbor for good faith installer, or actually good actor installers, I should say. If they adhere to that, they'll be in the clear. Folks that deviate from the disclosure DOJ will be able to go after an enforcement. There's also an enhanced private right of action against folks that deviate from the disclosure. That's an important deterrent because Oregon DOJ has finite resources. So having a private right of action as a deterrent will also be an important component of reining in bad behavior. And in closing, I just wanted to make sure folks knew, EWEB played a pretty big role in getting this off the ground in 2025. We work with a lot of Washington utilities through the public generating pool. Washington passed a law like this. We heard about it from Washington folks that briefed us on it. And we sort of played a facilitation role, bringing stakeholders together in Oregon last session. And I'm happy to say that the solar industry now, they've really taken this one by the horns. And we're happy to ride shotgun with them and the rest of the stakeholders now in 2026. And I'm confident this one will pass, although there's always a little bit of an ordeal to get something into law, but I feel pretty good about where we are on this. And it's been a while since I think EWEB's been invited to a bill signing. I'm sure this is one we would be, and I hope that comes to fruition. And I also really want to give a shout out to my EWEB colleague, Juan Serpa Munoz, who provided invaluable technical expertise and did a lot of constructive outreach to the solar industry as we got folks pointing in the right direction on this one. And the last topic I have before I take questions, there's one item you're not seeing on this list. It's wildfire liability. That's still a crucial issue that the legislature needs to deal with in the future. But last year's bill, I think, was such a bruising, struggle. The legislators, frankly, just didn't want, they needed some time to, I think, recover and come up with a different plan, and they will not be taking that up in the short session. But I certainly expect that to be back in the future in 2027. And that's all I got. Happy to take questions.
Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jason, for the synopsis, and I appreciate every time I listen to you, I always learn something, so I appreciate it. Two questions for the cap and trade bill. So I can't even remember last session if it was introduced or just discussed or rumored, but given the fast timeline of it, it didn't go very far the last session, and this session only has 30 some odd days. From your professional perspective, do you think the legislators will be introducing like a framework or work group as like an introductory for the short session? Or do you think they're going to have a completed bill with full written language out ready to be introduced with an expectation that it might go forward into 2027?
Yeah, I would say that their ambition, and they have really, there's two legislators that are really have the pin right now and that are formulating this. And they're going to have to make the case to their colleagues that they have a fully formed bill that's ready for prime time. But I would say their ambition is to try to have this fleshed out. There's always the possibility that they could try to delegate quite a few things to rulemaking processes, primarily at Oregon DEQ. And there's precedent for that. The California program was largely designed through rulemaking, and rulemaking sometimes has some advantages. There's some agility that rulemaking provides, and if there are tweaks you need to make in the future, you don't have to pass a new law. You can come back and go through another rulemaking. But I would say in order to get the political support for this and get buy-in from a very long list of stakeholders, I think a lot of folks are hesitant to leave things to rulemaking. They're going to want to see it in the bill. And so there's definitely going to be a sprint. And I could underscore that, a sprint to get that done by the start of February. And I think it's going to be tough to do. So, and I would not bother me if this ultimately were kicked to a more robust negotiating table with work groups and public process in 2026, because it is complex stuff. I've been working on it for several years, and there are still some components that I still find very complex, even after years of experience with it. So they're going to try to do it, but I think ultimately they're going to learn the hard way. You got to take the time it takes to design this program by statute.
Got it. Thank you for that. And if memory serves, I think the bill draft deadline is in 2 weeks. So good luck to them and all them involved. Cool. The second thing is on the reintroduction of House Bill 3955. So the city of Eugene just put out a survey considering a home energy score requirement ordinance. I think Portland also maybe successfully or attempted to, I can't remember, a home energy score requirement as well. Would this bill, do you think that this bill would interact with those policies that are passed at localities, or are they just separate enough that it wouldn't affect either way?
I think due to their local nature of those programs and because they're statewide, I don't think the reintroduction of this bill would interact with those programs, which are local in nature. I can double check on that, but I feel pretty safe saying there probably would not be any interplay.
Great, thank you.
Other discussion? Yeah. Any other discussion? The only other thing I was going to say was the bespoke fabrication and the rulemaking. Any progress since the AIS you put out?
Yeah, so they just started a listening session process, and there's a written comment period. I've never seen listening sessions done preceding a rulemaking, so that's sort of interesting. But it's very early in the game. Although I think we've learned a lot about the bill in that process. Namely, there are some exceptions for electric infrastructure. Specifically of the utility, like distribution systems and generation sources. So that is probably a relief to see that there definitely are some exemptions in the bill based on the statute that the bill was attached to. So that doesn't do anything for the water side, but at least the electric sector, we may have some exemptions on that side of things. And then there's more and more, I think, a feeling that this may not be enforceable for work that's done overseas and maybe even out of state. So that's a little more information than we had before, but we're still at the cusp of the beginning of that rulemaking, and we'll keep you informed on that one. And we'll definitely be weighing in along the way. Ultimately, I think the key is we want to differentiate so that this really only applies to really truly unique one-time products that are ordered and not things that are reusable or of everyday use. And that's the real, I think, trick here is making that distinction and finding the right language to do that.
Thank you. What other industries were in the room with you when they were in that working group?
So they had 3 different days, and I did not attend the private sector business community one. I was there for the one for local governments, so I can only speak to that one. We had excellent representation from counties, cities, universities, even the ODOT was there. Really, really strong representation across the board. I'd have to check on the one for the private sector. There was also a listening session for labor.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll let you go. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you. I'll see you in December. Appreciate the opportunity to update you.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is a break till, let's call it 8 o'clock. 15 minutes. 15 minutes. It's supposed to go till 8:05. Realignment recommendation. To be General Manager Lawson.
President Borowski, Commissioners, good evening. For the audio record, Frank Lawson, General Manager. Wanted to take the opportunity this evening to provide you with a quick update on the status of what had originally started out as a McKenzie Valley Service Territory study that was in cooperation with Lane Electric. At the end of last week, Lane Electric did authorize their general manager, Scott Coe, the authority to negotiate the purchase of potential purchase of assets in the McKenzie Valley and the transfer of EWEB service territory in that particular region. Some of this was discussed earlier under the budget title. Thank you. But I also wanted to just acknowledge that there's a number of steps left. And this really is a recognition of a change in the phase from more of a study to more of a negotiation or the initiation of a negotiation. The exchange of details so far and potential options has looked promising enough to start looking at the potential structure of an agreement. What I wanted to take the opportunity this evening to discuss with commissioners was at some point, it could be as early as next month, I could bring a resolution to this board authorizing me to negotiate and execute a potential transfer and sale of the assets. And so I wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity this evening to lay out any particular items or content or things that you wanted to make sure that we were considering in that process, or things that might be structured into a resolution. It could be areas that you need more education on. It could be things that we could discuss further as part of the resolution. But I wanted to, and using Jason's words, create my own little miniature listening session. I shouldn't say miniature, that sounds demeaning, more focused listening session around the topic so that I can make sure that I'm addressing any particular issues that you may have. I do know that as part of granting the authority, Lane Electric granting authority to their general manager, there were conditions and restrictions along with that, including that in his particular case, he does need to get review and approval of any potential contract. What we have typically done at EWEB is to grant authority to the general manager within the guidance that you provide, and then the negotiation and execution, as long as it's within those guideposts, are able to move forward. And so we're talking about a little over 3,000, somewhere between 3,000 and 3,300 customers that EWEB has in the territory. A pretty significant amount of asset space in the sense of size of service territory. Much of that you do have in and have had in various pieces of background material. So President Borowski, I really at this point wanted to take the opportunity. I did make notes earlier in the conversation had around the budgeting process, some of the questions around financial impact, which is obviously an important key consideration. But I did want to open it up to listen to the board, understand your issues, and also potentially answer some questions, but really more gather the kinds of questions that might need additional research at this time. So with that, President Borowski, I'll turn it back to you and be happy to entertain any comments or questions.
Okay, we'll start with Tim and go around the room.
Great, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was really no, that's not a word. I was really happy to see that during a listening session with the community that there seems to be some broad support of this transition as well. So that was one of the things that I think I was deeply interested in knowing. I think the only other thing that really came to mind from my perspective, there seems to be a clear outline, there seems to be clear direction. And so I want to leave space for my colleagues to be able to jump in. But one thing I'm not noticing is if this service territory transition is successful and goes forward, is there job loss expected on the EWEB side? Or will those staff be transitioned who are dedicated out in those areas? Would they be transitioned elsewhere? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think probably not specifically, I'll say a target list or a hit list of any type where we're looking at a potential downsizing. It's really an issue of more focused. There might be some open positions that we choose to redirect in other areas, but we're not expecting as part of a transition to have a layoff of any time, for example. So this is really about focusing the organization on the key work that we have in the territory that will remain, which is really our critical part of our community here in Eugene. And also recognizing that some of the benefits that you mentioned that people have acknowledged is direct representation on a board. This is a significant lift for Lane Electric. This represents about a 25% increase roughly in their the number of customers. So they recognize that investment. They also that direct representation coupled with the fact that they can interconnect it with other parts of the McKenzie Valley. So but not looking at a direct reduction in force because of this.
Thank you.
Several just trivia questions. So we have a separate tree trimming contract with 2.5 crews, I think, that are dedicated just upriver. That'll go away, correct?
Yeah,
And
tree
that'll
trimming would be a
savings.
significant area of opportunity for us to reduce cost.
And the physical assets, like the 8 or 10 houses that we own up there for staff, are they going to stay, or are we going to probably liquidate those two?
We'll have to take a look at those, Commissioner, and those are not just for distribution support. In many cases, those are for generation, which does remain. There may be some interest on Lane Electric's part in some of those or not. That'll be a detail that we would discuss, but those are typically for other purposes.
And the 6% silt, since they're no longer customers of EWEB and the 6% goes to the city, will that be a rate reduction for them? Or is that just embedded into this cost? Because technically they won't be paying that 6% silt anymore.
The 6% that they pay on our bill is based on revenue, the retail revenue. It would be really more of a net comparison rate to rate. They're going to have a new rate with Lane Electric. Lane Electric will have to incorporate their costs as they do. We know that initially going into this, we're comparable in rates. They have a higher basic charge. When you look at apples to apples, they're pretty close. That would be before the roughly 20% that we're forecasting through the COSA. But it wouldn't be split. It wouldn't be a rate reduction in the sense of it's just a overall rate versus overall rate and what gets incorporated in that.
I don't know that I have any specific guidance, but I just want to say that I'm highly supportive of this. I feel like Lane Electric is a rural utility and it's definitely better suited to serve customers upriver. And also the one thing that we consistently hear from upriver customers is that they want some kind of representation, and that won't happen with EWEB. And this is a way that gets them a seat at the table where they can be participants in their electric utility. So I'm highly supportive.
The one piece of pushback I would have on that, Commissioner, is that I do believe that this board, you in particular in the role, and previously Commissioner Brown in the role, the at-large commissioner have done a really tremendous job with the outreach that we have done in the community. The representation part is structural, and they will have direct voting rights within that utility. And I think that has been something we've heard from the community, and we want to acknowledge that and recognize that that's a benefit of this. But I would also say that as an organization, we've been very attentive to that area. We will continue to have a presence both through generation and the fact that it's our sole drinking water source. And so it is not done so that we can abandon the territory. We think we'll have a pretty strong presence there into the future. But I would push back a little bit and say that we have represented their interests, although not in a voting capacity.
I would just say that I'm also very supportive and echo the comments that Mindy made about, what we hear upriver when we attend. I hope that this does, meet their needs. There will be local, the people that are there fixing their lines are very close. I also think it will help our travel impacts and our costs. And so I'm looking forward to having that better align with the community. And I don't have anything else except for this. It feels like we're all kind of like, yeah, this is great, let's do it. But I don't want that to take away the pressure of getting us, a fair deal. So if we don't feel like there's a fair deal, then I will push against it. Just to throw that out there.
Commissioner
Thanks.
Carlson, I'm glad you mentioned that. It is and is intended to be a negotiation. The good news is that I think both utilities are, embarking on this, looking at long-term value and opportunity. We're not trying to make a quick buck on a territory, and they're not trying to get a steal of a deal. And so I think the intent is good from both utilities. Although there are areas and a lot of details to negotiate and determine, and I think we're entering that in a good way.
Okay, I put myself in the queue. Couple of quick questions first. One kind of goes to what John talked about, the properties that we have up there. Would Lloyd Knox Park be part of the transfer? Would they be interested in Lloyd Knox Park?
I've tried to peddle a number of things to Lane Electric of which they're not interested, including Leeburg. I told them that I would wrap $50 million around Leeburg and they could take it. No is the answer to that, Commissioner.
Okay, so for me, one of the most important things that I want to see come out of this, I mean, obviously financially and for a number of reasons, it checks all the boxes. The thing that I want to make sure that we try and convey is the communication side of this. We've had a presence up the McKenzie for over 100 years. That's how EWEB got started, was up the McKenzie. You read the book that's sitting in your office there, and it goes back to telling how we got our start and how connected we are to that river and that territory. And so I don't want us to come off as looking like we're turning our backs on that area. And so that's the comms part about this. We really need to get the story out there that we're transferring the electrical side because of it makes the most sense, and tell that story as why it makes sense to do that. But also we need to keep the goodwill that we have up there around the river and our source protection and our water, because there are going to be people that when they get their first Lane Electric bill and it's higher than the EWEB bill, they're going to curse our name, right? And so I just hope that the communication side of it is handled in a way that I know that we do a great job of doing it, but that's going to be one of the most important parts of this going forward, especially if we just say, take the ball and run, Frank. That's my part of if you're hanging on to that ball, I want you to make sure that that's something that is expressed very well.
I totally agree, Commissioner. There's actually 2 or 3 aspects of the communications. One is our continued presence. The other is the logic. Another one is the logic of which we're doing this, both from a Lane Electric and EWEB perspective. And then the third, there's quite a bit of just the mechanics of a transfer, final bills, how loans are handled. There's just a number of the mechanics pieces of how this would be handled with the over 3,000 accounts that are directly affected. So there's multiple layers to the communications. Totally agree that that's an important critical piece of it going forward. And I know that our communication staff, one of which is sitting in the back, is well in tune with that.
Commissioner Brown mentioned silt. Have we made the city of Eugene aware that there would possibly be a reduction in the silt payment going forward?
Yes, we have.
Good. I want to throw them for any curves. We're already hitting them for increased prices for billing. So, yeah, and then the only other thing I would say is, as far as the properties that we have upriver, you know, the generation plant at Lieberg and the historic, you know, part of that, the Art Deco, those types of things. I want to make sure that we keep that and have kind of a plan for that. You know, I mean, that's part of the Lieberg decommissioning, but it's still, it's all in the same thing. And there may be questions about that in the Communications Act. You know, what's going to happen to that Art Deco generation building, those types of things.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think it's a really important piece of the communications to understand what is actually involved with this. This is distribution assets outside of the substation. It is for delivery purposes. We still need a significant amount of substation presence for transmission and delivery of generation that we have up in that region. There may be further discussions around transformation and other kinds of costs going forward. Those are operational costs to be recovered on our part. But being very clear around what this is and what this is not, I think, is part of that communications.
Great. So just a follow up. This is for a talking point for me. This is about 50% of our service area, correct? About half.
From a physical perspective, it's not exactly 50.
But it's close
It's disproportional because I think it's roughly 3% of our accounts, and probably I heard some number between 25 and 35% of our physical territory.
Our geographic area.
Yeah, so it's significant.
I'm just trying to think about the GHG, you know, our next agenda item about the significant reduction in carbon, not running those big trucks up there and meter readers and everything else for that huge geographic area for just 3,000 people. To me, it's going to be a significant reduction. That's a unconsequential, you know, benefit from doing this, but it's not the reason we're doing it, but it's going to be a sidebar benefit, not having to run those trucks all the way up there just to fix one service territory.
Right. I do think that when we refer to long-term benefit or long-term value, there's a significant amount of time, fuel cost, fuel emissions, as well as vehicle wear and tear. Those are things that we'll look at from an avoided cost perspective as we project forward. It's a little bit different service model. You could argue in purity that those emissions may still exist because now someone else has them, but their distributed model of support is a little bit different than ours. And so the fact that we have to spend an extra hour and a half to 2 hours with all the time, expense, emissions, wear and tear, that will have a net benefit in some ways. Don't know that we've calculated that into the numbers that you're referring to yet, but it is an opportunity.
Okay. Thank you. You'll come back with the resolution in December. Is that what you're thinking?
I'm thinking I'll come back with a resolution in December. I will make sure that each of you individually is comfortable. We do have our one-on-one check-ins. And so I want to make sure that if there's any questions that you still have to ask next week when we get together, that I can make sure everything is covered in a resolution. But that is the thought at this point. There are 2 steps in between there. I have a steering committee review, and then I have a risk management committee review, which is part of our policy structure, given a decision of this size affecting things like power supply. So a couple steps to get that point, but that's the plan.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. EWEB greenhouse gas inventory results. Frank and Kelly.
Sit over. Abandon if I'm over here.
I do not. Thank you though for asking. All right. Good evening, commissioners. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Kelly Hale, and I'm the strategy advisor here at EWEB. I am joined by some colleagues in the audience, John Hart, and I just wanted to give a shout out to another colleague, Jay Heiner, for helping with the analysis tonight. I wanted to thank them for their efforts. So I'm here today to do three main things. First, I'd like to share the greenhouse gas inventory results for 2024 using a protocol that EWEB has not used before. Then I'm going to share what we learned from the new protocol, the lessons learned, and finally, I'll connect those lessons back to our board policies, SD2, the environmental policy, and SD15, our climate change policy. And I'd like to just give a quick spoiler alert. As Commissioner Brown noted earlier tonight, we have good news to share. We are on track towards our policy-based GHG emissions reduction targets, so that's exciting. That said, when we use this new EWEB protocol, or this new to EWEB protocol, it does create some challenges or new ways to think about how we have traditionally been measuring our progress towards our policy targets. It also creates some questions about what the board's intended outcomes are from these targets to ensure that the actions staff are taking are directly focused on what the board wants to achieve. And while today's presentation is short and mostly focused on sharing these new emission results with you, before I leave today, I hope to have a better understanding of the board's interest and timeline in potentially clarifying these desired outcomes from our policy at a future meeting. You don't have to articulate what you want to accomplish today, but ultimately, is the board interested in making updates to SD2 and SD15? And do you want to do this while General Manager Lawson is still in his current position? By knowing that, we can schedule the next set of discussions to address potential options on an appropriate timeline. So one last quick note about the slides. In your packet, you'll see that there's a robust set of slides to describe all of the inventory results and details. While I don't have time to go through every one of those slides in today's presentation, I do have all of those slides here available. And so if you have any questions, we can pull up any of those slides and address those during the Q&A. So let's start from the big picture. For the last 15 years, EWEB has been measuring and reporting our greenhouse gas emissions following established greenhouse gas inventory protocols, but we have only been looking at emissions associated with our operations. By using an expanded set of guidance from the Climate Registry that is specifically intended for electric utilities, we can understand our emissions better from a wider set of boundaries. This work supports a number of EWEB's 2025 annual goals, specifically number goal 6 and number 10. And ultimately, when an organization chooses to do a greenhouse gas inventory, it usually does so to learn 3 important things. First, we can see what actions we can actually take to address and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Next, we can see where enhanced collaboration with our partners could be needed. And those partners could include policy partners, major suppliers, or EWEB's customers, for example. And finally, we can also use an inventory to be really transparent about how we are taking action and progressing towards the intended outcomes that are outlined in our board policies. So let's take a look at our emissions results. The slide here is showing what our emissions results look like by operational category for calendar year 2024. On the slide here, the vertical axis there is shown in units of metric tons of CO2e, or carbon dioxide equivalent. And the bars represent the activities that EWEB is engaged in that lead to emissions. On the far left-hand side, you can see that the orange bars relate to emissions associated with power delivery. The blue bar in the middle are emissions associated with water delivery, and the yellow on the far right are emissions associated with EWEB operations. The first key takeaway is that the largest emission sources in the inventory are the orange bars that are associated with providing power to our customers. These are emission sources that we have not been measuring under the previous protocol. So let's look at those three large orange bars in the far left side. Owned electricity generation represents fossil fuel emissions combusted in EWEB-owned power generation equipment. We own a generator at a biomass facility that uses a very small amount of natural gas in their process. And so those emissions are from that facility. Then we have some losses from friction along our transmission and distribution system, and that's what the T&D loss represents. And finally, the largest orange bar represents unspecified market power purchases that are used to balance our portfolio. And because we can't specify exactly what the generation source is, they are assumed to be at a combined cycle natural gas plant emissions rate. That's why they're so large. Moving into the next key takeaway is that under the previous methodology, everything to the right of the orange bars, so the water delivery emissions and the operational emissions, were what was previously considered operational. But there's an important nuance that the new methodology helps us to address. EWEB has two products that we sell to customers, electricity and drinking water. And while our power customers have been interested for many years in knowing what the carbon intensity of the electricity product is that we sell, we can now also provide a carbon intensity of the drinking water product that we sell. The water delivery emissions include the electricity associated with running our Hayden Bridge water treatment plant and the electricity used for water pumping in our transmission and distribution system. And finally, the far right of this chart shows emissions from EWEB-owned vehicles, facilities, and staff travel. We are currently labeling those emissions as operational emissions, but as mentioned under the previous methodology, we have shown progress towards our operational emissions goal, including both the blue and a subset of the yellow emissions. That's what's included in tracking our progress. All right, so let's focus on what have we learned from doing this inventory. And at the beginning, I mentioned that doing a greenhouse gas inventory helps an organization answer these three questions. So now it's a time to apply the learning to those three areas. First, where are the best opportunities for EWEB to take direct action to reduce our emissions? And when we think about our power delivery, we can explore biofuel opportunities to reduce fossil fuel use in our own electricity generation equipment, and we can look for opportunities to reduce unspecified market purchases whenever possible. For our water delivery, the most viable opportunities for emissions reductions include looking at energy efficiency in our water facilities, which we already do through a robust process through our water comprehensive planning process, as well as addressing leak detection. And our AMI infrastructure can help with that over time as well. And in our operations, we have already made significant progress towards reducing emissions from our fleet, but continuing to electrify our pickup truck fleet and moving forward with some plans there will have an operational impact on that sector of emissions. As for where EWEB can enhance our partnerships, the GHG inventory process has already enhanced our collaboration with many partners, including the Oregon DEQ, the Federal Energy Information Administration, Bonneville Power Administration, International Paper, and more. And as we've talked about, this process helps us provide transparency in how we are achieving our board policy targets. And in a moment, I'll show that we are on track with both established targets under SD15, but through this process, we have noticed opportunities to clarify what those intended outcomes are and explore enhanced options for how we can get to the next level. So, as you probably remember, SD15, our climate change policy, is directive. It directs the general manager to take action in 5 different areas. Those are the bolded areas on the slide. And it creates targets for 2 of those areas that are outlined here, power generation and EWEB operations. And all 5 areas, progress towards all 5 of those areas are reported annually in the climate guidebook. Related to the first target, good news, EWEB is on track. When looking at where our power comes from, we use a simple percentage by fuel type methodology, and we can see that in 2024, the resources that provide power to EWEB's customers come from sources that are estimated to be 94% carbon-free. We assume that hydro, nuclear, biomass, wind, solar are all carbon-free resources, and the 6% come from a small amount of coal and a small amount of natural gas, which come from those market purchases that we were talking about. The percent carbon-free calculation takes all unspecified market purchases and assumes that they match the regional average fuel mixes for the Northwest Power Pool. But this is different from a carbon accounting methodology that takes those unspecified market purchases and assigns a marginal emissions rate of a natural gas plant to all of those power purchases. When it comes to the second target, for EWEB's operational inventory, we can see that EWEB has reached and achieved our 2020 goal of 25% emissions reduction over the 2010 baseline back since 2014, the black dotted line on the chart here. And we have achieved our 2030 milestone of 50% reduction since 2023. So we're several years ahead. Our next milestone is not until 2050 when the policy states that we need to be carbon neutral from our scope 1 and 2 operational emissions. And that's what's shown by the dotted green line at the bottom of the chart. So on the next couple of slides, I'll include the exact language from the policy on the targets that we have set and provide a couple of questions to get your creative juices thinking about, but these are for future board meetings, right? As we think about if the board gives direction tonight that you would like to think about updating the language in the policy, there are a few questions that we could look at. First, as we look to our operational emissions targets, when seeing the scale of those operational emissions compared to other parts of our inventory, are scope 1 and 2 emissions from our operations still the appropriate boundary? They're some of our smallest emission sources. So is that still right for the target? As we look to the 2050 carbon neutral target and trying to make a plan to get there, is the board supportive of using a variety of different tools or tactics to get there, including potentially offsets in addition to direct emissions reductions? And EWEB has already met the 2030 milestone 7 years early, and the next milestone isn't for another 25 years from today, which is 2025. So is the board interested in setting an interim milestone between now and 2050? Those are some of the questions that we could explore if we got into potential policy updates. As we look at the policy related to power generation, there are other questions to consider. Percent carbon-free resources is a target that does not currently conform with GHG protocols or methods. Is there an interest in adjusting that to something that would address emissions from our power supply or power portfolio? The policy goes into some particular language that talks about trying to, achieve 95% annual energy from carbon-free resources by 2030 to the extent possible and practical without distinct adverse impacts to customers. So we'd like to get some board direction on how you think about defining distinct adverse impact to customers. There are different ways to think about that and define it. And if the target were missed in a year with significant market purchases for balancing opportunities, would the board want EWEB to take additional actions, such as purchasing offsets or something like that to address the carbon intensity of those power resources? Finally, there are 3 areas of the policy that don't have targets. Is that something you would like to set in the future? When it comes to policy SD2, our environmental policy, this policy is a little less directive. It outlines, it was created many years before SD15, and it was designed to just identify areas of focus, which we do take action in all of these areas. But there is some redundancy with SD15 based on these focus areas. Not all of these are currently being reported on in EWEB's climate guidebook. And just curious if the board is interested in having policies that are more directive than SD2, similar to SD15, or if this is fine to leave it as is with just this area of focus. So those are questions for future board meetings, but what I'm really looking for today is to get guidance from you all on, is it a board priority to address SD2 and SD15? Would you like those to be combined into a single policy moving forward? And is gaining clarity relating to SD15's language, methods, metrics, or performance tracking a priority to take on in 2026? Specifically, again, as I mentioned before, while General Manager Lawson is still in his current position. Or is the board comfortable with having executive leadership and staff using discretion within the existing guideposts of the policy on how we implement this moving forward? And with that, I'll open it up for discussion. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll start with Sonia.
Okay, thank you. I have a number of questions. Appreciate the update. I love the new breakdown, so you can really see kind of the actionable areas. I am curious, so the section that we use natural gas on, I'm just looking, you know, these, if you go to the slide that has those different impacts broken down into 3 separate categories.
The one that I showed or one from
the one that you showed already?
Sure.
I wrote down the slide number on most of them, but I didn't do it on that one.
This one?
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so on here, so we have, you know, obviously power delivery purchases is one of our biggest impacts. And we're going to have to tackle that in order to meet SD15's goals. So there's that piece. There's a few of the other ones that I'm trying to tease out, like where we can have actionable impacts, you know, sooner rather than later. Where do we use natural gas? That's for heating in some of our buildings?
So this orange bar?
No, the other one over there.
Oh,
sorry.
Yes. So in the yellow bar, the natural gas, we use natural gas for space and building and water heating at Rock, the one facility. We used to use it also at headquarters, but when we sold that facility, that usage dropped off. So we do use some natural gas for this space and water heating here.
And IP.
Okay.
The IP natural gas is in the orange bar. That's the owned electricity generation. We own the generator at that facility, and they use some natural gas along with black liquor in their biomass facility.
Yeah, I would be curious to see what the breakdown is of the power delivery purchases. I think you had it on another slide potentially, but where those purchases come in. Anyway, to that piece, so we have the BPA contract that is coming up any minute now that will be.
I actually forgot to mention, sorry.
Yeah.
I did forget to mention that in items from general manager. It's only a $3 billion contract that I ended up signing. I would say a week and a half ago. It was countersigned by Bonneville last week, so it is now official. And we'll have some kind of picture or something with the board. I just didn't have time to prepare for that, but it's a minor detail.
Well, okay, so that happened. So that contract, I mean, for the next 25, 30 years, how long is it again? 25 years?
2044.
2044. Okay, so until 2044, so just shy of our 2050 mark, most of our purchases are set in there, but we have the market purchases are outside of it. How does the BPA contract impact this? So I know we had criteria in there to meet our SD15 goals.
There's a certain degree of flexibility. If you think about Bonneville being roughly 80% of our delivered power supply, that is still going to be the case. There is some degree of flexibility and some degree of relying on our own resources and potentially market purchases. It doesn't sort of inherently lower that. That would have to be a conscious decision. It's not as obvious as just saying, well, reduce your market purchases, and that it may reduce our carbon, but in some ways could inject carbon into the region depending on when and how we're buying and selling resource, if that makes sense. If we're selling Carmen Smith into the market in the morning and buying solar in the afternoon, and we might do that for financial reasons as well, that solar resource, when solar is present, we're getting a market-based purchase, even though it might be cleaner at that particular time. So this is one that will still be, 80% Bonneville, and there'll still be some balancing that we have to go through, but it is something to consider in part of our conscious decision making.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're trying to answer your questions about SD15 and SD2 and whether we combine them and how we achieve that, I mean, I don't want to wait until 2050 to do that, but I also don't think that we can if we're going to hit the goal of hitting the reduction that we need. So, but it's also driven by a lot of these other contracts that are long-term contracts. So it would be wonderful to me to know what areas we can actually mitigate and what those kind of, places are where we can tackle and what the size of those are. So I'm personally interested in, combining the two policies just for the sake of, ease of use and clarity for staff and others. I think that would be beneficial if others are supportive of that. And in doing that, figuring out what maybe those actionable steps are and kind of clearly delineating out what those are. So there's a clear roadmap for, this is what we think we can do by this time. Okay, now let's hit it. I am curious too. So on the biomass side of things, so the other slide that you just showed that we had roughly 100,000. If you go back to the other one. Yeah. So we're 3% biomass, but then the other slide that we were just on, this one says 100,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide. Another report that came out said something like the Seneca biomass generation, it claimed that it was over 200,000 tons. And this is all of our purchases. Don't we purchase all the power from Seneca via the contract that we also just signed?
So there's a couple of key distinctions.
Okay.
This chart here only represents what we call anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions or human caused from fossil fuels. In GHG protocols, biomass emissions associated with the biological carbon cycle are treated separately and they're reported separately. So we have emissions associated with that, but they're not considered as causing human caused climate change. The carbon gets sequestered in the plant materials as the plant grows, and they're just released to the atmosphere when the plant materials are combusted. So
because whether or not we would have done something with it, burning it versus letting it decompose, it's a wash.
It's the same.
So that's why it's not counted. It's not an additional impact.
So this set of emissions results is just those fossil fuel emissions. We do calculate the emissions from biogenic sources and report those separately, but I didn't include that in this chart here.
Okay, great. I just wanted, for clarity, because I know there's a lot of people who care about this. Wanted to have that.
And can I just make one other quick note based on the earlier conversation? So this large orange bar, it includes both EWEB's unspecified market purchases that we make on our trading floor in short time and real-time trades. That it helps us balance our portfolio. It also includes BPA's unspecified market purchases. So, and we have some influence on those things. There are maybe some things that we could influence, but we don't have direct control over the power resources on the market. And we also don't have direct control on what commodities are specified all the way back to their source. This is the problem of lack of a system built to track greenhouse gas emissions through the entire electricity system. Sometimes power is just assumed to be a commodity, and if you need it, you buy it, and it's not tracked all the way back to its source. And in that case, that's how these protocols tell you how to address that in carbon accounting. But there could be ways for us to try and get more specificity on where the power comes from. And those are some of the ways that I talked about in the lessons learned that we could address that big orange bar. But we have a lot more control that we could do for the other orange, the owned electricity generation source than we do on the thing that we have, some influence on, but less control.
Great. Okay, I have other questions, but I'll let others go.
Okay, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I had a quick question on this particular slide. So own generation, electricity generation, you said that that's IP. Is that all IP or are there other owned electricity generation sources?
That is our only owned electricity generation source that has fossil fuel.
Got it. Thank you.
So we have many other owned electricity generation sources, but none of them have a fossil fuel attached to them.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was my thought and I wanted good clarification on that. So thank you. I'll be just totally frank. I'll be Tim, but man, it took me 11 months to make that joke. Here we are. Talking about ways to reduce emissions for power delivery in particular, and mentioning biofuel made me bristle a little bit. That feels more of a lateral move than a great step in a good direction. So I'm deeply cautious about that one in particular. So I just wanted to mention that and say that out loud just so that that's heard. I also wanted to highlight under to answer your question on the combination of the two policies. I think it's fine. I understand the reasoning behind it. I would be a little bit anxious around losing some of the non-descriptive or actionable items that's under SD2. So for example, it highlights transportation, but also highlights employee education, and that's not a greenhouse gas emission of educating employees, but that's still an important value. So I meant to look at our other policies to see if there would maybe be much more of like a split of like values and a better place for those particular non-trackable policies that are set, but I'm fine with that. I don't feel I'm ambivalent. I don't feel one way or another too strongly. But I do want to also highlight one of the policies that I think is important is particularly the customer decarbonization. I would like to set a target for, I think, all three of these. And I think that that's really important conversation to have for the SD15. But I was shocked when I joined the board, and I'm still shocked to see that the city of Eugene has a climate action plan that has very specific goals, 100% electrification by, I think, 2045. And that sort of matches up with our own timeline as well. And so being able to match with our community partners what they're doing and just coordinate and jump on the bandwagon makes sense to me. So those would be some of the conversations and discussions I'd like to have about that in particular.
Yeah, to be clear, I think that the climate recovery ordinance from the city of Eugene is focused on an emissions reduction goal per year that equivalates to about 7.6% emissions reduction for the community as a whole per year. And then they also have a fossil fuel reduction goal. And those are covered by the Climate Action Plan. EWEB is a participant in that. We made some voluntary commitments as part of that process. And in a previous presentation on the Climate Guidebook, we showed how we're 86%, I think, complete there. And as we get the AMI infrastructure in place, then that will be 100% complete with the commitments we made there.
Indy?
To answer the three questions for today, I would say if there's a way to combine SD2 and SD15 into one policy, that'd be great. Without it being too unwieldy, whatever makes sense doesn't really matter to me, as long as the policy is solid. If you feel that it should be one, if staff feels it should be one and can word it in a way, that would be fine with me. I do think that gaining clarity regarding SD15 could be a priority in 2026, should be a priority. I think that since Frank will only be our general manager for maybe half that year, and then we also have 2 board positions that are coming up for re-election, I think that it would be a good time to solidify what this board thinks about our climate policy.
Right. Staff turnover and board turnover are both, on the mind to decide the priority and the timeline. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. my questions earlier about cost and implementation. I'm okay with combining it as long as it does, but I'm still worried about trying to, I mean, if you were asking us or me to give you a grade on our accomplishments, I'd give an A+ based on what you've done. And so, you talked about, okay, increasing the electric fleet. Well, think about the electric fleet during another ice storm. Those guys are out there 16 and 18 hours. Cars don't run, electric vehicles don't run that. We don't have a way to charge them. And I mean, we have to think about what we're doing, and their electric vehicles are much more expensive than others. And so it's all cost, it's all rates, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. And so I want to make sure that we are so close, 93, 94, and the goal's 95. And we're already, 5 years ahead of our GHG reduction on our operations. I want to make sure that we don't continue to, chase a nickel with a dollar. And because rates are so important, I think, to that. And so I'm okay with what you're proposing, but I'm still harping back to the cost. I just don't want to do it so we can check a box. And offsets to me are not the great. I mean, when the city couldn't meet their goal and they went and bought a forest up in Washington, I don't think that's, to me, meeting their carbon goal. I mean, they could check the box and say, oh yeah, we met it. But how did we do it? We bought a forest and we said, no, we're gonna cut it. That's not playing by the rules, in my opinion.
I completely understand. There are many people who support your same position. One of the benefits of looking at different instruments, and again, it all depends on what the board is trying to achieve, and there's many options to do it. But it does provide an opportunity to look outside of the industry that you're operating in at other opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on planet Earth, right? And so because this is a global problem, you can find the lowest cost way to address emissions. Whereas if you bind yourself only to your particular industry, the cost could be even higher. And so it depends on what the board is trying to accomplish, and it depends on, how much you want to spend. So those are the questions that would need to be addressed depending on which method you would select EWEB to move forward with taking action. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Can you pull up the goal 2?
Goal 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this goes to combining the two. I'm not in favor of combining the two. I think goal 2, if you look at the things on the left of goal 2, watershed protection, there's some things in there that, to me, goal 2 is kind of, this is the direction we want to go. And goal 15 is like, this is the levers we're going to use to get there. And so for me, I don't know about combining the two of them. I'm not convinced on that. Second question that I have is, we're talking about using a new goalpost, basically, with your new things. Did you apply those metrics to 2010?
All the way back to 2010.
Okay, so it's not.
So we would have a baseline.
So would the baseline changed as well?
If we wanted to set new policy goals related to a baseline, we could do that.
Okay, yeah, because that would be important, because I don't want to say we're bringing all of these things in and then our baseline doesn't have those things that we're measuring against. So I want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples.
I'd like to do that too.
Yes, so that is something that's important to me. As far as the timeline, I hear what I can lean into what Mindy was saying as far as having Frank and the board members that are here. That's a compelling argument. But then I also heard people in public testimony saying we may have a general manager that may think differently and may have different ideas. And since we are at a point where we're very close to what we want to be at for 2026, leaning in and giving that legacy to a new general manager when he may have things that we haven't even thought about, or directions that he may want to go, or move this thing, and then we have set a policy that may hamstring him. Since we are so far along, I don't know if that's, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So I'm not there yet.
I just want to point out that our next general manager could be a she.
Yes.
Or a.
Yes. There you go. Okay. All right, so we'll give you a couple more minutes. And then Frank. And then Tim.
Okay, I can be really quick. The fugitive refrigerants, there are alternatives out there. Do we use them and we're still having impact, or do we not use those alternative
The
refrigerants?
reason those are 0 in 2024 are just because there were no leaks recharged in that year.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that there aren't leaks happening, but they were small enough that they didn't require our alarm system to go off and require a recharge. The way those, both the SF6 fugitive emissions and industrial gases in our building and vehicle HVAC systems work is that they usually leak very slowly over a period of time. And we calculate them just on the years that they experience a recharge, because we assume that whatever was recharged back into it is what was equivalent of the leak.
But there are different types of refrigerants that are out there that have lower GHG emissions. Do we already utilize those types of refrigerants?
Not
Or
yet.
do we?
SF6 is a chemical that's used in our substations. It reduces arcing in our equipment. The technology that is being used there or piloted in some utilities is to use air breakers. That is not at a place where EWEB feels that it's a mature enough technology to try and do that.
Okay.
And so we are watching that closely and following the work that has been done in other utilities, but it's at our size and scale, it's not appropriate for prime time quite yet. At the building and vehicle usage, we use very small amounts of other refrigerants. There are some policies at the EPA level to replace those over time. We have not changed any of those refrigerants. They're specific to the equipment that we use so far.
That reminds me, this doesn't take into account any of the concrete impact from the scope 3 emissions.
No, we have focused our efforts to date on what the policy says, and it says to focus on scope 1 and 2 emissions from our operations. And the advancements that we've brought into the methodology to focus on our supply chain have focused on our power supply chain so far. We do many times, as you can see on SD2, looking at environmental planning and triple bottom line analysis. We do take that seriously. And when we're doing major capital projects, such as the Lieberg decommissioning analysis, we did an analysis on all the alternatives to identify which ones would have more significant GHG impacts. And at that moment, identify where mitigation opportunities might be in a particular project. We don't do that. So scope 3 analysis on all of the things that we buy in a given year, because it doesn't match with the timeline on when you could take action.
Okay.
But that is something that if the board chose through a revision of the policy, that we could certainly add. You could provide direction to staff that you would like to see that included in the future.
And then to the point about combining the two, I mean, the only reason I thought that it would be helpful, I mean, this does talk about GHG reduction. I also think that if there are, you know, potential impacts that we call out, there could be some alignment with, you know, our water and energy conservation, our watershed protection. I mean, there are things that in each of those categories that align with GHG reduction and pollution prevention and, you know, solid waste, water mitigation, like all those things are kind of interconnected. And yes, there are different goals with them, but it seemed like, to me, it still seemed like it could be combined if that was the appropriate path. I'm fine with what makes sense from a staff perspective on clarity. I think it's mostly for staff to be able to use it as an actionable tool. So whatever makes the most sense from a staff perspective to use as an actionable tool, I'm fine with that. And then my last question was on, can you go to slide 3? I had slide 43.
Can you tell me the slide name?
I don't know. It just says number 43 down at the bottom.
So my slides are changed from the order of your packet. So
SD here, it's power generation,
great.
if that's the correct.
I don't know. It was on what's showing up on the screen. So it's not one it's in my packet. It's on the slide up there.
Yes, this one?
Yes. Okay, so this is, so I just want to make sure. So these are the percentages of power that are used, not the GHG emissions.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
This is percentage of megawatt hours.
Percentage of megawatt hours. Okay.
Deemed to EWEB's load by fuel type. not
Okay.
greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so if we go and purchase on the market, the Northwest Power Pool, is that kind of the mix that we get on a market purchase? Or it really just depends, because we could go out on the market and purchase solar, for example, or we could go purchase wind, for example. I'm still a little fuzzy on whether or not if we purchase the mix of resources or if we can target our market purchases at a particular source.
We could do both. It's possible.
Okay.
And so if we have a specified source, we have identified that and put it to its fuel type.
Okay.
And if it was an unspecified source, then it gets attributed to the resource average associated with the region.
Okay.
So that's how this chart is calculated. It's not a GHG chart. It's a percent by fuel type for the amount of energy that goes to our customer load.
Okay. Got it. Great. Thanks. That was it for me.
Tim.
Yeah, commissioners, I was just going to mention, I can probably follow up with some of you individually. I think the dilemma that we've had is the trade-off between providing some clarity at this point, given all of your backgrounds and management's background in this issue versus the trade-off of potentially new board members and new management setting a direction going forward. And there's pros and cons to both of those. There's also some clarity between the two policies. I don't have a strong preference one way or the other. I know that we've navigated some challenging issues where there's lots of trade-offs that we have to talk about, this is one of those types of subjects. But I'll do some polling offline to try to get a little bit more clarity around how you view the sort of a new position, new board, go forward versus where we are now and sort of leveraging the strengths we have versus opening up new opportunities, because that's really kind of the dilemma that we're talking about.
Thank you, Chair. I meant to mention this at the top. I think, Commissioners, we received a letter from a few local organizations that were commenting on the greenhouse gas emissions in addition to some of the public testimony we heard tonight. So I think it came in before any of us had an opportunity to read that, but I do want to highlight that for future conversation. And they asked some similar questions that we're asking tonight. So secondly, I guess, like, what is your vision of what a combination of these policies look like, if any?
I have many thoughts about that. I don't know if, I mean, Frank, do you want me to go into any of that detail tonight, or is that more appropriate for a future session?
I can also re-ask this to maybe not, because I'm recognizing it's 9 o'clock at night. So it sounds correct or incorrect. You have a specific vision that you're looking at for a combination of these two policies.
Again, it all comes back to what the board is intending to accomplish. I don't know if when you wrote a 95% carbon-free policy, you were actually meaning fuel type, or if you actually meant to try and get to an emissions reduction goal. If you did mean to get to an emissions reduction goal, that is not the way we're currently measuring that. If you wanted to get to that, then there could be ways to rephrase that to give clearer guidance to staff on how we would measure that and how we would measure the adverse potential impacts related to potentially cost, and how we could address what that could look like on an annual basis. I do think having, you also have the carbon neutrality piece of the operational emissions. Those operational emissions, as you saw tonight, are very small in comparison to everything else. If, there are opportunities, depending on if you want to get to that, there are opportunities for direct emissions reductions, but those tend to include things like switching fossil fuels for biofuels, which has been one of the main ways we've addressed our fleet emissions to date. If that's off the table, or if that's something that gives you pause and offsets are a challenge, then we would need to have a serious conversation on what it would actually look like to get to neutrality, right? And again, it's all dependent on what you all want to do, but 25 years from now seems like a long time before we have another milestone. And we're already far enough along that, you know, my recommendation might be to do something in the interim. But those, again, it's all dependent on what you as a board are trying to accomplish and how you would like to see that addressed.
Thank you. Yeah, I am hearing you on what you're saying. I did want to add my voice of support of caution around offsets, because I think my understanding is, and my perspective is, when you're purchasing an offset, you're doing so because you're unable to lower your greenhouse gas emission. And so you're purchasing that offset to do that. And so that feels like a concession that we're unable to do that. And I don't think that we've hit that point yet.
Can I add one point on that?
Sure.
I would just say that we could have a much more robust conversation about what an offset is, what it means, what claims you can make when it's associated, what you get from that purchase, and how they could work in a longer session. And I would just say that there might be some additional details that we'd want to have at a future session.
Final point that I want to make is I'd be, and I'll support however my colleagues feel, but I would be interested in a sort of midway marker for another goal to set as a board, primarily just for our board and future boards to acknowledge and to keep a goal out for. 2050 feels like a long way away. It also isn't, but recognizing that 10 years from now, this board and staff might look very different. And so making sure that they are staying on track with the goals that we understand them to be now, I think is important. Sure.
All right. Thank you for the discussion.
Right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Next item is future board agendas. I wanted to bring something up here. We got a memo regarding the the ballot measure that's going to be moving forward next March, the Watershed Bill of Rights. I want to do a kind of a head nod around here to see if we want to put that on an agenda to find out, get more information on it. So us as a board may want to take a position. Staff can't take positions on this. They can give us information, but I think it would be something that would behoove us to have information so that we can see what the impact is on our utility and on our customers. Does that sound like something that you would like to see in the next month or two before the election? Okay, all right, we'll put that in there. We'll try and figure out when we can squeeze that in when we have our agenda setting. We might have to actually have an agenda setting meeting instead of looks good. Okay, anybody else have anything that you want to throw on an agenda or have us talk about?
No, I just have a question about KPI. I've been getting a lot of questions about why did we invest in smart meters? Because they've seen no benefit or anything. And so in the next KPI, are we going to have an update on that about, we spent millions and they've been sitting there for 5 or 6 years, and the group of people that are asking me, they want to know what's the benefit? Why did we spend millions and millions of dollars and we don't, other than maybe some water leak detection? So we don't need to answer it now, but just, is that coming up in the KPI?
Not in a KPI,
Okay.
no. The benefits from smart meters will come when we get into time of use, peak reduction. We're talking multiple millions of dollars of optimization between supply and delivery. On the electric side, that is the significant driver, and it's way more than any operational benefit would ever be.
Well, it was the timing and the technology. There's kind of a concern.
The other pieces of that, Commissioner, are the ones that we are working on, the EES. So we changed our customer system. We're looking at rate design. We are likely to focus some of the initial time of use on, or recommend time of use go into some of the large industrial opportunities, which would be probably a bigger bang for the buck initially than residential, which is an aggregated approach. But all these are things we're talking about to bring to the board as far as 2026 and where we want to go with that. But measuring a specific KPI probably.
I didn't see anything on the agendas for the entire year about smart meters and that. So maybe either I missed it or you're going to put it on there.
No, we're not going to talk about smart meters specifically. We're going to talk about the goals and how they would contribute to the benefit.
Okay. Board wrap up. On the table.
I would love to see that data, just to echo that. The benefit of the, I mean, outside of that, just, I know we have operational savings attached too. It would be good to see it. Okay, thanks.
All right. That 9:10, we're adjourned.
Need